Hello and welcome to ATP Insights, where we cover the most important tech news in Asia. Today's Thursday, the 18th of June, 2026. Let's get right to it. We have another super show to you today with a great lineup of guests and some kind of really interesting news, I thought, for today. So on the guest side, on the news side, we're going to talk about Microsoft is considering DeepSeek, out of China for Copilot. I thought that was actually kind of interesting. And then on the guest side, initially we're going to have Carlos Herrera, founder and CEO at Nimble. He's going to join us to talk about how production-grade AI infrastructure will help enterprises turn agents from experiments into reliable business systems. Following that, we will welcome Harm-Julian Schumacher, co-founder and CEO at OneLot, to discuss how AI-powered financing and dealer intelligence can help used car dealers sell more cars, access capital faster, and run more profitable businesses. Next, we will talk to Kiran Sharma, co-founder and director at Vasu International Payment Solutions, to cover how AI-enabled payment infrastructure will help businesses move money faster, operate across borders more efficiently, and serve customers in markets where traditional banking continues to fall short for some of these underserved cohorts. And then Ben Lawson, CEO at Sxored, that's with an X, will talk about how AI-powered credit analysis will help leaders reduce fraud, improve asset valuations, and make better lending decisions. Later in the program, we will be joined by Ittay Hayut, CEO at Hoopo, to explore, I guess regular words have run out, to explore how real-time asset intelligence helps logistics companies make faster, smarter, and more autonomous operating decisions. Then Damian Bierman, co-founder of Blackwired, will join us to talk about how proactive cyber defense helps companies secure AI systems before attackers exploit them. And finally, Jose Florido, Chief Growth Officer at Magnific, will come to discuss how AI-powered creative platforms are helping companies turn creative work from a slow production process into a faster, more collaborative, more scalable operating system. And before we get to all of our guests and some news, let's hear from our presenting sponsor, Twilio. Twilio is the secure and scalable platform to build amazing customer engagement without the complexity, with the AI-driven workflows you need to connect. They are trusted by over 300,000 businesses. It's the platform that simply makes more possible. Visit Twilio.com to start building today. Okay, let's get to some news. I think this is actually really, really interesting because it's a confluence of a bunch of things that we've been talking about, both on ATP Insights and on our sister show for the US, AGTP, a global tech podcast. Microsoft is considering, or appears to be considering, DeepSeek, so the Chinese open source model for Copilot. So DeepSeek, from a China perspective, let's go over some details here, right, is being treated in China like a national AI asset, not just like a fast-going startup. We know this. Again, they've raised about $7.4 billion at a $50 billion valuation. And most investors are not buying directly into DeepSeek, but into a limited partnership controlled by the founder, Lian Wenfeng. And here's what's really interesting about this too. I want to talk about the structure of this because it sounds to me in a way kind of like what Mark Zuckerberg did, not exactly, at Facebook. The other investors get no voting rights and they face a 5-year lockup, right? So they have to be involved in this company for a while. The exception here is China's National Artificial Intelligence Industry Investment Fund, which invested directly, and they kept their voting rights. But that makes sense, right? Because the government of China is now treating DeepSeek like it's some kind of national asset, at least at some level. And that tells you something really important. At least it tells me something really important about this. The government wants to have at least some kind of nuanced strategic control, and that's really important. Here's the other thing that's really important too, though. At the same time that all this is going on, right? Remember, before, when DeepSeek, it seemed like it came out of nowhere, but it really didn't. They said they could build this model for $10 million, that they weren't going to raise any money, but now they've raised a ton of money at a pretty high valuation. If we had told you this 2 or 3 years ago, $7 billion at a $50 billion valuation, you would have thought, wow, that's a big number. Anyway, at the same time, Microsoft is showing the enterprise side of the same story. What's going on here? So Copilot Cowork is not just some kind of chat application inside of Office. You know that if you're using Microsoft Office at any level right now, you see Copilot pop up everywhere. And this is an agentic system It's designed to do long-running work across the entire Microsoft Office. And this is one of the things that gives Microsoft a big leg up on everybody else who's trying to integrate into Office. And this has always been at Microsoft's kind of modus operandi, right? The way they like to do things is they'll take a technology that everybody else has, and then they'll integrate it into their own system. So it's so much easier to use and so much more effective. And because they have access to the internal APIs to which you may not have access, they should be able to. I'm not saying they can, but they should be able to make their artificial intelligence way more impactful inside their own systems, which means Microsoft Outlook, Microsoft Word, right? All this stuff that's in SharePoint, any kind of organizational search that goes on, and every other workflow that's embedded into Microsoft Office, their Copilot is going to be doing this. And remember, you remember we did I think we did this on AGTP, yeah, last night or 2 nights ago. We talked about how Anthropic was thinking about going from a monthly subscription number, whether it's $20 or $100 or $200, to usage based. Every time you click a button or every time you ask it to do something for you, you're gonna have to pay for a token. They switched that back, but it appears that Microsoft isn't going to switch that back per se. With the use of Copilot inside of Microsoft Office, and it looks like they're moving to usage-based pricing because these systems that are operating inside of Microsoft Office are just continuously calling the model, retrieving context, using tools, and running just constantly. And this kind of makes this unlimited AI economically difficult, even for Microsoft. And remember, Microsoft is one of the earliest investors in OpenAI, which means ChatGPT. And it also has access to, and we talked about this before, it also has access to Anthropic's Opus 4.8. I mean, like everybody else does, right? So people can pay for that. And my presumption is that inside of Microsoft, both of these systems are being used, depending on which system each one of the individual programmers, or just which one of the individual employees like better. And that's fair. But the connection between both of these things, the fact that DeepSeek raised money and that Microsoft is considering using DeepSeek for their Copilot, not just using OpenAI or ChatGPT for this, is cost. I mean, not every time, but a lot of the times that we've been talking to people about artificial intelligence and particularly agentic AI inside the enterprise, we always reference the Uber story. It's becoming a little bit trite these days, but we do reference it. But we do ask people, is it too expensive if you're paying on a token by token basis? Is it too expensive if you're doing this on a usage basis just for routine tasks? I mean, if you think about it, if you're paying for usage based, if you literally just like log into ChatGPT, or in this case, Opus 4.8 or 5.5, right? Or 5, and you just say, hello, that's using a token or some amount of a token, and you're getting charged for that. And I think that was part of the pushback that was happening last night or the night before, after Opus 4.8 was released, and they said they were going to go to usage based on June 15th. And remember, we showed you Martin's email from them that said, yeah, never mind, we're not going to do that anymore. Anyway, Microsoft says that Copilot Cowork will be billed using Copilot credits with pricing based on model use, context retrieval, tool calls, and runtime. And it also says that customers are not locked into one model and that lower cost models are part of the product strategy. There have been reports, and this is why we're talking about this, that Microsoft is exploring a Microsoft hosted version of DeepSeek version 4. This is their newest model, or other open source models, to be fair, as a cheaper option inside of Copilot Cowork. And if DeepSeek is used, Microsoft said it would be optional, hosted on Azure, and governed by Azure's enterprise security, compliance, and data residency controls. Why does that matter to me or to even users? Well, there are always security issues here, right? And there's somehow China has become the boogeyman when it comes to technology. It was not always this way, right? But now there's this big fear that these big Chinese companies are embedding some kind of spying, I don't know what else to call it, into the software, into the hardware that they're producing and then selling to the rest of the world. But the fact that Microsoft is considering using DeepSeek or other open source Chinese models for their Copilot Cowork, to me, is a big deal. Now, let's just back up again and do a little, I always like to dig a little bit deeper. What are we thinking that DeepSeek's funding structure, let's go back over this again, says about how China wants to build its internal AI super companies? Right. So DeepSeek's round appears designed to raise large amounts of capital without diluting founder control. Again, it looks to me a lot like Facebook. Even today, Mark Zuckerberg still has voting control rights over everything that goes on at Facebook, or at Meta, excuse me. And I think that the founder of DeepSeek wants to make sure that he retains decision making as well. So most investors into this company put money into a limited partnership managed by Liang Wenfeng, not directly into DeepSeek. And as I said earlier, they don't receive voting rights. We already talked about the one exception, which is the Chinese national government. Fundamentally, we have to understand that DeepSeek is being capitalized like a strategic infrastructure company, not just for the AI infrastructure itself, but for the country as a whole. And that's kind of important. And remember, this money that they're raising is not just for growth. They have been very agile and very likely to be able to build for much lower cost. But what they're doing is they're using this money for compute, for research model development and survival inside a much tighter chip environment, right? Highflyer's history shows that DeepSeek's advantage has always been tied to compute strategy, not just model design, in the sense that it's the way their model works against the compute that they're using and against the available compute that they have that's really been the differentiator for them. And I think that that actually ends up being super important and will continue to be super important for them. And in a way, it gives them a big benefit, right? Because they don't have to use all of their investment money in the same way that OpenAI and Anthropic need to, which is to continually develop models. I think, and the interesting thing as well is that DeepSeek is going to focus on how they can use compute to be more efficient, which is going to lower their costs across the board, which makes their open source strategy even better. And they may be the first company in this space to do what I'll call the Linux strategy or the Red Hat strategy, which means you can use the model at very, very low cost or free, and they'll build services around it to make sure that the usage of that model is better and more efficient than anybody else. So why does DeepSeek matter to Microsoft? Or frankly, DeepSeek as a proxy, or a metaphor for other open source companies, particularly as I mentioned earlier, when Microsoft is a big investor in OpenAI, but also hosts Anthropic as well. Well, Microsoft's problem here is not just access to the models. It's matching the right model to the right task at the right cost. I mean, if you think about it, everybody that uses Microsoft Office does not have the same budget for agentic AI. So Microsoft needs to ensure that Copilot Cowork will use or has to use a multimodal approach, and that lower cost models have to be available as part of that product roadmap. Otherwise, you're going to freeze people out from their ability to use or to get the benefit of agentic AI, or frankly, any sort of AI help, even on the chat side inside of Microsoft Office. And frankly, to be fair, inside of the Microsoft suite of products that it offers that are associated with Microsoft Office. And we know this, right? These agentic products have become expensive, and they don't make one sort of simple, neat call to the model, right? In other words, if you just go into ChatGPT and say, I don't know, give me some background on Michael Waits. That's really simple, really straightforward. By now, it kind of knows exactly where to go. But if they're going out to receive context, call other tools, or run for longer periods of time, like agentic AI normally does. In other words, when you ask for a background on me, it's not agentic at all. You're essentially using ChatGPT as just as a modified search engine. And that's fine. But when you start using agentic AI inside of any of these services that Microsoft offers, it's going to start to get really expensive, but not just expensive for the user. Apparently, it gets expensive for Microsoft Compute as well. And remember, if DeepSeek is focused on optimizing their compute usage, not only is that going to be better for Microsoft, but it means that OpenAI and Anthropic have not done that to the same level that DeepSeek is doing it. And that strategically, it may be more important to DeepSeek just as a business model differentiator than it is to OpenAI and to Anthropic. And Microsoft's own pricing framework now explicitly reflects this model use, this context retrieval, and this idea of how long it's running inside of the processes that they're doing. And DeepSeek represents a credible low-cost model family. Microsoft does not need every single one of their tasks to run on the most expensive frontier model. It's just not necessary. I mean, for a lot of enterprise work, you have to believe that sorry, for a lot of enterprises where good enough or just good enough is good enough, in the sense that even if it's cheaper to use, but the results that you get are good enough for just like rote tasks or repetitive tasks that you're always doing, things that don't require that much compute. But still, if you're on a usage-based system, you're still going to get charged for. The way to win here, particularly for both Microsoft and the combination of using DeepSeek, is to just say, wait a second, maybe we don't need the biggest and best frontier model to be able to do these repetitive tasks. It just doesn't matter that much. But almost as important, right? What's the other thing that's super interesting to me is what does, remember, Microsoft is one of the earliest investors in OpenAI. They knew where this was going, right? They have their own models that run inside of GitHub. We talked about that a couple of days ago as well. Microsoft has access to a bunch of different models, a bunch of different compute. So what does it tell us that they think about the real economics, of enterprise AI agents? Well, I'll tell you what it makes them think. It makes them think that it's too expensive. It tells me that the first phase of AI pricing, particularly on the agentic side, was just too simplistic. Now, we know that Anthropic rescinded this idea of you're going to have to do usage-based pricing. We'll see over time like how this changes and how they change that pricing methodology. But this idea of subscription-based pricing works when AI is mostly just chat or summarizing existing stuff, right? But it seems to me that even these big enterprises that are using agentic AI and even selling agentic AI, that they believe that this model breaks down when an agent can run hundreds of tasks per week just for you. Just think about how much compute that's going to take in relation, again, in relative terms, to what happens if you're just using a chatbot, right? So Microsoft has told Axios that unlimited use was not viable because some users run very high task volumes. Now, my feeling here is that over time, what we're going to have a subsidized model where some of the big enterprises could potentially pay, in some cases, for usage-based artificial and agentic AI, but that small users are not going to have to pay for it, even if they exceed the cost of what their monthly subscriptions are. I just don't see these big frontier model companies being able to, I would say, get away with charging smaller users more than whatever their monthly subscriptions is, right? And if you look at Microsoft's own pricing model, it's a useful signal. The company is separating the base Microsoft 365 Copilot subscription from the agentic workload. So in other words, if you're just using Copilot in a way that's relatively basic, they're not going to change the pricing. But Cowork requires the Copilot user license, but the agent itself is built on usage. So the same thing is probably going to be true for GitHub. It's moving in the same direction, which makes sense. I mean, GitHub is a Microsoft-owned property. So the fact that they would have the same sort of policy and the same way they go about this makes perfect sense to me. Now, GitHub had announced that all Copilot plans would transition to usage-based billing on June 1st. And this suggests that this is not just a one-off. Now, finally, what are the enterprise and other risks if the Chinese models become part of Western AI infrastructure? I think this is actually the really important question. But to be fair, I don't think this part of the question is really easy to answer. If Microsoft says that DeepSeek is going to be hosted on Azure and covered by Azure security and covered by Azure compliance, and also all the stuff of the data residency controls, then it's going to be unlikely that DeepSeek is going to be able to skirt these guardrails at scale and lose the trust of its customers externally, and also lose the trust of Microsoft and the people that are using Azure. And I think that's actually going to end up being really important. The bottom line here is that enterprises want reasonably priced AI. Cloud providers want margin, right? So they want to be able to make sure that they're getting access to their compute and their artificial and their agentic AI in a way that makes sense for them. But the model providers also want distribution, and they'll take that distribution and get that distribution any way they want. And DeepSeek sits kind of right in the middle of this. The more useful and cheaper that it becomes, the harder it is for the markets to ignore it, and the harder it is for governments at any level to treat it as just another software supplier. Okay, before we get to today's guests, let's hear a quick message from our second sponsor. Boomi is the data activation company for AI. Boomi powers the agentic enterprise by bringing data to life across your business. Trusted by over 30,000 customers and supported by a network of over 800 partners, Boomi helps organizations of all sizes achieve agility, efficiency, and innovation at scale. Okay, let's welcome our first guest, Carlos Herrera. Martin, can we bring Carlos in? Carlos, how are you? I am super. Can you hear me okay? Awesome. I love talking to people that are happy. You look like you're a happy guy. How are you doing today?
I'm great. And you?
I am super duper. Okay, look, we wanted to bring you on to talk about how production grade AI infrastructure is going to help enterprises turn agents from experiments into reliable business systems. But before we get to that, tell our listeners and our viewers a little bit about Nimble.
Sure. Nimble is a technology consulting firm that started around 12 years ago.
Okay.
We work mainly with startups at the beginning, but in 2018 we moved into the enterprise segment.
Mm-hmm.
Work with we entered the enterprise segment with Central, the one card that is the largest loyalty platform in Thailand. And we have been building solutions with the enterprise in the last 8 years, with companies like Jollibee and worldwide with them, and other companies here in Thailand, basically around the world, like enterprise client, Easy Hotel. So we serve mid-market to enterprise segments, and we have also been building our own solutions in the last 4 years. So that these solutions are already being rolled out across more than 1,500 outlets in the region. So yeah.
Okay, so a couple of big sort of thematic questions for me, if you don't mind. The first of which is, you said in 2018 you moved into serving big enterprises, which is a completely different animal. And then the second thing is, once 2023 rolled around, now you have all of the implications of, I'd say, more democratized access to not just machine learning, but to real artificial intelligence stuff based on the LLMs and the releases of ChatGPT, and then after that, Anthropic and their Opus line, right? Maybe you can talk about those two changes in order. What was it like switching into the enterprise market? How hard was that? What were some of the things you learned by doing that? And then what are the implications of all of this stuff that's been happening in the artificial intelligence market, both since 2022 and since the beginning of 2026 and the onset of agentic AI?
Okay, so the difference, like when we entered the enterprise, was mainly like how we manage the projects, right? So when you are in the enterprise, now you don't have one stakeholder that usually in the mid market or in the startup market.
Yeah,
you only have one owner, right? Now you have probably like 20 people owning the outcome of the project, right? So communication is extremely important. So we also prepared, like in hindsight, we took a very good decision many years ago to have very technical people in project management. So they were able to basically manage the relationship with our customers from the business side, but also from the technical side. So this has been the key success for us when we entered the enterprise. So it was a smooth transition for us because we were working in the same way with mid-market.
Mm-hmm.
The difference was mainly about stakeholder management and complexity of the projects, right? So sales cycle also become much longer, but we have been working like the last 8 years pretty much through referrals, right? So we become recommended, and basically that's how we engage with these new companies in the enterprise segment. So it has changed mostly like the stakeholder management and complexity of the projects and the scale, of course, applying many different ways to scale platforms than when you are scaling a startup or like a mid-market company.
Got it. Now talk about the stuff that's happened in the last like 6 to 9 months with AI, and particularly agentic AI, and how that's impacted the way you serve your customers.
Yeah, so it has changed a lot because mainly like there's this perception that SaaS or like all the solutions, software as a service, is gonna disappear, which I think in for personal software is likely gonna disappear. But when you're talking about enterprise or like mid-market or enterprise, the enterprises still need someone to provide a service, right? So the solutions are not gonna be deployed there, and this is where most of these native AI SaaS are failing, because the new trend that is appearing is that the customers are still looking for not only the solution, but also someone that can deploy the solution customized for the needs, right? So this is basically the emergence of the forward deploy engineers, where we send engineers to work side by side with our customers, understand really well how they operate, and customize the solutions to their needs. Before, it was a off-the-shelf solution and basically having consultants to build on top, right? But now what you send is a team of engineers and product managers to basically build the customization on a much faster pace than in the past, right?
Carlos, I feel like you have a camera mounted above my desk, because the two notes that I wrote down were FDEs and tech people in project management. And so I wanted to ask you, I wanted to follow up with you on that, if you don't mind, and say, did you start having to send the FDEs in as agentic AI became more important? And you had this sort of, I'd say fortunate, not lucky, but fortunate consequence of, as you said, having tech people as PMs. And if those tech peoples are working with product managers, do they kind of double as the forward deployed engineers as well? Or is there kind of a mixture of those two things together, particularly now when it comes to running more complex projects that involve agentic AI?
Yeah, so I think like what is happening now is like every role is tending to become a product builder. So
yeah,
like a three-way standoff between engineers, designers, and product managers.
standoff. You've seen that, yeah?
Right. So at this point, like now, like all the product managers are starting to build solutions. The designers are starting to also build full prototypes. Even our pre-sales teams are building like full prototypes, right? So the roles are tending to become one, that is basically the product builder.
That was my point. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's still like you still need to have like people with a strong expertise in how to manage customer communication, right? So there is still like some part of the role that be like their core strength, that is communication or like stakeholder management, but the roles are tending to become pretty much the same. So when we send engineers or when we send designers, the way we send them is like basically the people that has similar skills in terms of communication to the product managers, right? So they have hold a conversation, that they can do proper discovery with the customer, and find out like what are the pain points that they want to solve, instead of just focusing on deploying a solution, right? So
yeah. I was gonna say, have you seen the economics change now that it almost becomes necessary, right, to do FDEs, to deploy engineers to your clients? Has the economics changed for you as a company now that that almost has to happen again, like I said, because of the complexity of this? What changes there on the economic side because of that?
yeah, so in the like before AI and before like probably like before 2025,
Right.
the service business was very challenging in the sense that it becomes more like a treadmill model, and it's very difficult to you have the dilemma, like, do I build the business around how much how many staff I have in the company, or how many customers I have, right? So it's very challenging to balance, right? But now, like with AI, like we see like a much larger opportunity, because we have also our own solutions, like fully deployed on production and larger scale, but we also have provided service for many years. So it becomes like a flywheel. So now, like when we go to serve, we are starting to see what we can productize when we send engineers to work with our customers, because some of them don't even have the capability or the capacity to even roll out their own software as a service solution, right? So we come here, we build something custom for them, but in the grand scheme of things, what we're doing is basically building a horizontal solution that applies to more than one company, and they get the benefit that we co-develop with them, and something very like fully customized for their workloads and like for their SOPs, right? So that has changed in terms of like the perspective of the business, forces us to think more in terms of solutions and horizontal solutions instead of just pure service. We are thinking about hybrid kind of source of revenue or revenue streams, like part solution, like part that will look like more like a SaaS or usage-based solution, plus the service that basically forward deploy engineers. We send engineers to do the rollout, make sure that they do proper change management, that they have internal buy-in, so there is no pushback from the teams on the ground, because this is one of the challenges that you eventually will face. Yeah, so the revenue will change to a mix of between service and solutions instead of just pure service that was our play for almost 10 years.
Yeah, I was going to say, it seems to me like the core competency or the core service of the company is almost has to change in the context of what clients need. And I guess the other side of that is, you read a lot of stuff, and maybe this is US specific, but I don't think so. But you read a lot of stuff in the news about how artificial intelligence is going to create this job apocalypse. And it sounds to me from what you're saying is, one, if your customers don't have necessarily the internal capability to do the things that you were talking about or the things that they have to build, that they're going to have to hire more people to be able to do that, first of all. But second of all, as well, if your own company is not going to, what was the way you said this? Structure the business around the capabilities that you have right now, as opposed to the potential number of clients you could get. That may also mean that because of the power of artificial intelligence and agentic AI, you're also going to have to hire more people to serve the volume of new customers that you're going to have. Does that make sense in the context of this as well?
Yeah, so I think that there is a transition period that we are going through now.
For sure.
In the sense that there is a lot of uncertainty, and companies think that they're gonna basically replace 100+ people team in the call center with an AI agent, right?
They're not, but yeah, go ahead.
But when they realize, when they just go beyond the pilot, right? The reality is more messy than it looks, right? Like when you are in a prototype, you have clean data, you know where the data is coming from, but what you realize is that the intuitive part for business owners is to focus on cost reduction, and this is like what creates kind of like the job apocalypse scenario, right? But I think the beauty of AI that it opens more opportunities for revenue generation.
Yeah, so that's what I was just writing down. Like, what's the balance between cost reduction and extra revenue generation, right? Because that has to be the real thing. In other words, if you're making $100 and your costs are $75, you have a $25 profit. I'm simplifying to make a point, right?
Yeah.
But if you just cut costs to $50, now you're making $50. But if you increase the number of revenue you have 10 times, because you can be way more productive, right? Now you're making $1,000, and instead of having a profit of $250, you now have 20. You know what I mean? Like, the numbers just get bigger regardless, just because you're doing more. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. I think like we can do way more than before. So I think like with the same team, you start to see like relatively small teams doing $1 billion revenues pretty quickly, right? So that shows that actually like the revenue per employee would tend to go up, because we can produce more, faster, and customize more, right? So when you talk about manufacturing, you will start seeing like heavy personalization at scale, right? So this basically increase the consumption for sure. So the job apocalypse, I think that there's gonna be role displacement instead of job displacement, because people will move to do much higher value added tasks instead of answering a call, phone calls in a call center to answer questions about information about the company. They're gonna move to do telesales, and you have a voice agent basically solving all these inquiry kind of requests, right? So you basically reallocate the roles and you repurpose them to have a much higher impact in the company instead of just cutting costs. So there is gonna be like business owners will have a balance between the two. So we are seeing the two things at the same time, between like productivity enhancements, right? Things that are very tedious that takes 6 months, moving to pretty much real time, which basically unlocks a lot of more capacity for them to do other things, or even increase production lines, let's say, or produce more, right? But also on other customers, we're seeing is that they are looking into this as an opportunity, that there are leads that they cannot process because of the size. And also it's coming to us. Before AI, we were focused 100% on enterprise and maybe one end to mid-market customer, right? But now we can actually move downstream. We move down market to serve more mid-market companies, because we can serve way more of them, of these mid-market companies with less people. So we don't have a capacity constraint as we had before.
Yeah. So the lead story for today's show, just before you came on, was how Microsoft itself is considering for its cowork Copilot using DeepSeek. You've heard of DeepSeek, obviously, yeah?
Yeah.
And one of the differentiators for DeepSeek is it's open source and its costs are just lower than Anthropic or OpenAI. So kind of two things that I'd like to ask you about. And the first is, internally, is Nimble seeing its own switch of models to open source because the costs are just lower? And two, as a consulting company, at some level, right? Not just consulting. We already talked about the tenor of your business has changed in the past few years. But would you also recommend to some of your clients to use some of the open source models because they're cheaper for things, for just like repetitive tasks that they're doing that doesn't necessarily need the best possible models?
Yes. So definitely, like when you have a few different problems to solve here. So when you're talking about like data privacy, our customers are very reluctant to send their secret sauce to frontier models, right? So this is
they
probably
should be
the first thing, right? So you're starting to see now like a hybrid strategy in terms of like, okay, maybe I can host on a neo cloud my own model, my fine-tuned open weights model like DeepSeek or Kimi, and everything that these models can handle, I can delegate to a frontier model. So you eventually will have these kind of hybrid setups, and companies don't want to be also locked into just two companies basically doing everything for them.
Yeah.
So companies want to make sure that they are not locked in forever into like one of these two frontier companies forever. Right? So they opt out. Like there are some tasks that can be done by Kimi or Quen or DeepSeek at a much lower cost that is very repetitive and doesn't cost much to operate. Right. So instead of having a frontier model doing this, and also adding that to that, like the data privacy is a key concern for our customers now.
Do you think the view on this is different in Asia in general, maybe Southeast Asia in particular, than it might be in the West?
Probably yes. I think like we are still not mature yet in terms of AI usage.
Mm-hmm.
I think we are still seeing a lot of prototyping, but not like real use cases.
Really?
I think America is still like ahead in terms of, for example, like forward deploying engineer model, like started by Palantir like several years ago. It was like a very odd bet back in the day, but now this is pretty much like the only way that a service company or consulting company can move.
It just feels like the status quo right now. Like if you're not doing FDEs for deployed engineers, then you're missing out, because you're missing out in two ways. One is, and again, tell me where I'm wrong, you're not properly training or explaining to people how to use the products that you've built using this AI and agentic AI. But the second is you're not getting enough feedback from your clients to understand how they want to use it and then how you can actually help them better. Yeah.
Yeah. So usually, like before this, the off-the-shelf solutions basically just focus on pushing the product to the enterprise, and basically just you just leave it there, and customization is basically a layer added on top of the bill of the yearly bill, right? But now the customers are more cost conscious, right? And they can see the capabilities of AI. They can buy code some small things for like personal tasks, but when you talk about like deploying solutions, you either lose on the service side if you don't have solutions, or you lose on the solution side if you don't have a solution as a service company. So you need to have the two of them.
So
right?
tell me, so you said something earlier. You said that like there's still a lot of prototyping going on and not a lot of moves into production. What is stopping people from, particularly now that we're in June of 2026, what is stopping people from going from, okay, I prototyped this, it works at this scale, now I want to move it into production? What is the challenge there that people are facing that stops them from moving from prototype to production?
Yeah, so I think like there are a few challenges, right? First is change management, right? So companies are running, and we have been working a lot in manufacturing and logistics.
Mm-hmm.
So disrupt on one day of production is totally impossible to do, right?
Sure.
So
That's not good.
the change management is very critical. So this takes a lot of time, right? There is this it takes significant amount of time to get internal buy-in properly plan the change management to roll out something to production, right? So it takes probably 3 to 6 months basically just to make sure that the results that we get with the agents is basically the same that they get on their own. But instead of spending 6 months, it's basically just 1 day or like basically just 1 minute.
Right.
So it's like showing like proof of results. It's more like a pilot kind of a scenario instead of rollout, because the prototyping helps you to sell top down. But if you don't have internal buy-in, there's going to be resistance from the teams on the ground, because the teams on the ground will feel that they're going to be displaced, right? But when you explain them like, okay, this is how it's going to work. This is what we're going to do. This is what basically you just get internal buy-in. And another challenge that we see is like the data lineage, right? So in many companies, some information is hidden in many places, right?
Yeah.
So
The big problem is this sort of fragmented data structure that they have, where like they want to have access to this data. And in a way, maybe I can change the word. It's not necessarily hidden. It's just like, I'm not 100% sure where it is, kind of thing. Yeah.
Or we need to ask somebody that knows where the data is.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have a company risk here, and this is another thing that takes time. Is basically building all the data lineage. For us, basically, we just need to know where the data is, where the information is, before we build anything around it, right? So understanding if the data is available or not, or we have to build new systems of record to store this data. But this is probably a data lineage takes a lot of time. So these are projects. So when we think about like how we do FDE, we don't think about like we are pushing a solution and we customize the solution. What we're doing is we treat every customer as a project.
Yeah.
Right? And you send the teams, and basically there are outcomes tied to the project. So milestones and outcomes tied to the project. So I think this is probably the way to remove this prototype stage challenge that the companies are facing, right? So yeah.
Okay, one more quick thing, and then I'll let you go.
Sure.
What type of infrastructure challenges do these companies have, whether they're mid-market or whether even large enterprises, when they need to start running agentic AI, whether it's in a pilot or even at scale? Like, what are the infrastructure challenges that they're considering today that they didn't have to consider prior?
Yeah, I think it's like we are seeing more like hybrid approaches.
Yep.
In terms of like, they don't want to run everything on the cloud anymore. I think we start to see some kind of hybrid workloads, either your own not neo cloud, but probably your own small on-premise deployment, right? If the model is easy to, that doesn't require much resources, you probably will have these models running locally. Also for latency, if you are doing production line prediction in real time, you want this at the edge. You don't want to be sending the data to a frontier model to return. So I think it's more like about problem definition. When you talk about the problem definition, like what are LLMs good at, right? So you are talking about like probabilistic flows, right? Like a call center. But if you're talking about closing books, you want to roll out accounting agent doing that, hallucinating with the accounting, probably not, right?
No, I don't want hallucinating accountants for sure.
Right? So I think like this is when you have like more deterministic outcomes or output, probably you will have more like on-premise kind of mindset. And when you're talking about like what the good frontier models, like probabilistic or like voice models, probably you will rely on these frontier models or like frontier labs models, right? So like 11 labs or like OpenAI, Anthropic.
Got it. Okay, Carlos, I'm going to let you go. You were really great today. Thank you so much for spending so much time with us. Where are you based, by the way? Just one last thing.
Bangkok. We are based in Bangkok.
Good. So are we. Okay, it was great to meet you. It was great to talk to you. Thanks again for your time today. Martin, let's bring in Harm-Julian Schumacher. Good afternoon. How are you doing today? I am doing super great. It's great to have you here. And where are you based as well?
So I'm in Manila.
Awesome.
Basically been here since 4 years, but originally from Germany.
Yeah, the German part I figured out by your name. Look, it's great to have you here. We wanted to talk to you about how AI-powered financing and dealer intelligence can help used car dealers in the Philippines sell more cars, access capital faster, and run more profitable businesses. But maybe just give us a little bit of background on OneLot before we jump into that.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think you summarized it already quite well. So what we are doing right here in an emerging market, it's pretty much provide financing around used cars.
Mhm.
And how do we do that? We specifically focus on the dealers, right? They are the guys who are running the market. They buy cars, they fix them, they maintain them, they sell them, and fundamentally also provide financing, right? And that's where we're coming in and basically tackling the current challenges they are facing when it comes to anything around financing. So in particular, we help them finance more supply, right? Help enable them to buy more cars, short-term loans, grow their inventory, have more cars for sale. And then at the same time, we also help them on the consumer side, right? So when they sell a car, the consumer needs financing, that we help them to provide that, and fundamentally do that by giving faster approvals and reimbursing them faster, right? To get the money back of the loan amount from the customer and basically increase their cash conversion cycle. So really like enable dealers to buy more cars, sell them faster on financing, and create like more turnarounds. So every dealer we work with, we fundamentally want to level up.
How fragmented is the used car market in the Philippines from your perspective? Again, just to give people a sense of what that market actually looks like.
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. So let me answer that in two ways. Like, how does a dealer look like and the landscape there, and then also from a financing perspective?
Yeah.
So, look, for context, like I'm from Germany, right, and I'm this stereotypical German. So on my mom's side, right, our family business is a dealership, a car dealership,
Oh,
and a
great.
dealership. So there are obviously a lot of like learnings, which like what we see in Germany, in Europe, in more developed countries versus here. And I think two key differences are, I mean, number one, like the dealers here are, it's way more fragmented, right? So in general, you really split it, right? You have new car dealerships, you have used car dealerships. You don't have an overlap in between. So, and we are really focusing on the used car guys. So, and then at the same time, these guys are also significantly smaller and the market is more fragmented, right? I would say in Europe, in the US, you have dealerships which have like, I don't know, thousands of cars and like across several branches. Here, the average dealer has 20 cars.
Oh, wow. That's really small.
Yeah, it's really small.
Yeah.
So it's quite a lot of dealers. So, and I mean, but that brings me over to the next problem. So you have these basically family owned dealerships, right? It's normally like the owner's really running it. Maybe the wife is involved, maybe the son, whatever it is, and really these entrepreneurs. But then really two challenges. So number one, they don't get proper financing for themselves, right, to grow their business, because generally SMEs hard to underwrite, and I mean, but those guys have a lot of collateral, right? They have cars, but for local financial institutions, they don't really understand the collateral. They don't understand how to appraise that, how to price it, how to build up the capacity and capabilities to actually use that collateral. So
Right.
pretty much like these guys are really cut off from financing. So 95% of customers don't have bank loans.
How do they buy the cars?
It's pretty much retained earnings, right? Working with family and friends, getting that, and then like step by step, right? For every car you sell, you save your cost, but you retain earnings. So next time after you did that with 10 cars, maybe you can buy another car. So and informal channels also, but really like proper access to the right tools or the right loan products at the right time, super limited.
How does technology kind of disintermediate this fragmentation in the sense that once you apply technology to a business that's that fragmented, it kind of tends to consolidate it a little bit, right? Because people realize, there's a guy 6 miles away in the Philippines that has 20 cars. I have 20 cars. If we were pricing them together, at least if we understood how it was pricing in real time, we would be able to just have a better system for both pricing, for retention, for financing, all this other stuff. Where does the tech stack fit into this?
So, I mean, tech stack fits on multiple levels. But like one thing you always have to acknowledge, right? Regardless into which market you look at,
Yep.
used cars is always a fragmented market, right? If you look in the US, if you look in Europe, right? Like, yes, dealerships are bigger, but fundamentally you can still run a profitable one showroom dealership in your place, and you just differentiate by having the right inventory at the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, proximity does matter, right? Because the guy who lives like 2 streets away from you is probably going to buy a car from you as opposed to a guy 6 miles away. Is that fair?
100%, right? Or like make it very extreme. Doesn't help you if a customer in LA is looking for a car and like there's a perfect car, but it's in New York.
Right. Yeah. I was going to say in Boston, but yeah, fair enough. New York or Boston, same thing.
It doesn't move the needle for that
Not
example.
really.
So you always have a certain natural fragmentation in the market. But nevertheless, just because of the availability of capital, like dealers tend to be smaller, and it's even more fragmented. And even with like independent dealers who do this on the side and have like 1 or 2 cars. So, but where does now technology really come in, and especially from our end, right? So where we are using technology is fully, and that's where we started on the underwriting side. So in particular, looking at really tech-enabled on-the-ground inspections, right? So you go to a dealership, you check out their inventory, you understand their showroom, you really understand their characteristics, and by that you can forecast their revenues and their cash flows and their profits, right? So, and what is really moving the needle on dealer side, right? Fundamentally, they're really driven by like, what inventory do I have, right? So let me give you an example. There could be a Toyota, it's a mid-price car, but it's selling normally quite well, right? So you take the asset value, if you know that, and then you can forecast like on average, like how much sales are they doing any given month. But then you have more high-end cars, right? Significantly higher value, yet it will probably take significantly longer, right? So what we basically do is we do a top-down approach with a lot of machine learning, a lot of data to use this thing where we like, hey, really check out their cars, and we use that and their values to project their future cash flows. It's a combined approach from, well, inspection, bottom up, collecting data via apps, geotagging, automated photos and videos, capturing what cars it is, and then combine it with the machine learning data, and then feeding into our credit models, right? So this is like traditional machine learning you have, where you can really like capture data in proprietary channels to do a significantly better underwriting and unlock the credit or the value they have stuck in their inventory for them.
And where does agentic AI fit into this possibility of actually increasing sales for these dealers? And does using artificial intelligence allow them to be more proactive, both on the underwriting side, meaning they can underwrite faster and understand where the market is better, but also in finding people that are actually looking for used cars in a way that they may not have been able to look before?
So I mean, look, if you look at it from a dealer perspective, I think there are a lot of like applications down the road where dealers themselves can actually use agentic AI. I mean, like very obvious use case. I mean, we also always want to try to call them and ask questions. And I mean, these guys are busy. You don't reach them. So just have a solution which is automatically answering phone calls, giving certain level of information, whatever, on the different marketplaces and classified platforms you have, like chatting with customers, and just be like always on, always like fast responses in a very accurate way, right? So that's really coming from the dealer perspective. I think what is also really interesting is how you can apply now agentic AI in different, like coming from the financing company, coming from our angle, to use that to drive or to improve your experience, to get more efficient, to collect data better and faster. And by that, actually like bring down, do better underwriting, bring down your cost base, and by that also provide like fundamentally more affordable loans. That one is indirectly impacting the dealers, but generally, yes, they can like get capital at more affordable rates.
And are we finding that a lot of this interaction is taking place in chat apps? Like I noticed that like, you know, my my insurance company talks to me through Line, which I find really weird in this day and age. But that's what they do. Like, how does this improve or change the customer experience if your car dealer or your potential car dealer is WhatsApping you, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So I think overall, I see three use cases, right? For like as a financing company, as a fintech, how can you use Gen AI to really bring down or improve customer experience and improve your operations?
Yeah.
The one thing is like customer experience. Then there's sales, and there is like lastly also the credit operations. Let's start with the customer experience, what you're touching upon here. So dealers in general, or SMEs in emerging markets, and also I think that to some degree holds true everywhere,
Right.
are not the guys who are the most structured people who are like, hey, I have all my systems in place. I put things into this app. I have all the information I need, put it all in there, hit a button, done. Great. No, it's more like, okay, I have something, I want to like send it over, and then I want to do the other thing. And in general, I mean, they like messenger platforms. I mean, here it's not WhatsApp, it's Viber and Facebook Messenger.
Yeah, fair enough. Viber. I just love the fact that people are still using Viber. Sorry, go ahead.
I think it's two countries. It's Philippines and it's Ukraine, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
But yeah, here's a big thing, right? So now, how do you use that? How do you now, based on this knowledge, create better customer experience? And that's where we believe in this like hybrid approach. So what we are doing is we create group chats where you have a dealer in there, right? You have an account manager in there,
Yeah.
and an AI agent in there. And the AI agent is basically now new information comes in. What can they do, right? They can like open documents, they can read them out, regardless if it's a photo or it's like a good PDF or it's whatever, a screenshot or so, like really making sense of the information. Is this whatever a new lead? Is this a new application? Is this an existing application? Oh, I know that license plate. I know that name. Okay, let me link it to that one. So you have now like an intelligent layer, right, which you have to train, but who can like really take unstructured information, codify them, structure them, compare them to your existing systems, and provide then basically immediate feedback. So I think how we really think about it is like we don't want to 100% create an experience where dealers are just chatting with AI bots. And I don't think like for now that's the way forward. It's more like and using this intelligence they have, and in particular turning unstructured data into structured data to create a better experience and create immediate feedback also for the AM, right? So like ID comes in, okay, checklist, now this loan is everything actually all done. Feedback into the chat, which is good for like, hey, we're good for this one, right? And now the agent can like, our account manager can use that, the dealer can use that. But clearly this hybrid approach where you use agents as well as a human being both in the loop.
Do you think, so one more thing and then I let you go, but do you think better data access, and better communication, so better back and forth between the dealers, the people that are funding, right, that are doing the lending, and the purchaser of the cars and the AI agent sitting in this sort of chat group will then allow more traditional financing to become more prevalent in the used car market because people just get more comfortable with the fact that it's not as risky as it may have appeared at first?
I mean, that's probably where things are going. And the question is the timeline, right?
Yeah.
Will this happen in the next 1 to 3 years? So that's probably very hard, right? I think there are, like, especially in the used cars, there are more components to that, right? Will overall financial institutions go on the way that they use Gen AI to structure information, make them better available, by that have less touch points? Yes, for sure. So that, I mean, that's something clearly a value proposition we have, and we're doubling down already. But I mean, on the used car side, you also have this whole thing of like, it's not only about the borrower, it's also about the asset. about the car.
Yeah.
So there's always a different layer where you go in there, you do the checks, you understand the actual asset, and by that can provide a better underwriting. And then just for context, in the Philippines, like something like Kelly's Blue Book or so doesn't exist.
I was gonna say, I was gonna ask actually about the Blue Book, but I was like, that seems so retro, like from the 1970s. But it is still a thing. Maybe it's now digitized, but yeah, it doesn't exist in the Philippines. Okay, look, I'm gonna let you go. I really appreciate this. It was really thoughtful and very interesting to learn more about the used car market in the Philippines. And thank you so much for coming on the show and for giving us your time today.
Michael, thanks so much.
It's my pleasure.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye for now. Okay, Martin, let's bring in our next guest, Kiran Sharma. How are you doing? I am doing super duper. Can you just tell me before we jump in, like where you're based?
Canada.
That's what I was thinking. Okay, because on your LinkedIn it says Canada. I'm like, I'm looking outside behind you. Unless that's the most amazing virtual background, that does not look Canadian to me. Not at this hour.
No, this is Makati, Metro Manila.
It's more, which is interesting because the guy just before you, another guest in Manila,
Really?
also in an office near you in Makati as well. Anyway,
Interesting.
yeah. And actually, you should know each other because he does.
I'm thinking I'm probably I don't know who he is right now, but I'm sure I do.
He does auto financing. So if you're in the money business, you should probably know who he is. Anyway, let's do this thing. We wanted to have you come on the show because we want to talk about how artificially intelligent enabled payment infrastructure helps businesses just like move money faster, do cross-border stuff better, and also serve customers in markets where traditional banking falls short. And maybe you can tell us a little bit more about Vasu International Payment Solutions before we get into sort of the weeds, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So Vasu is a payment gateway at its core. We're an OPS licensed payment service provider governed by the Central Bank of the Philippines here. So essentially what we do is help online merchants collect money and bring it to wherever they need from users across the globe, whether that be in developing areas, emerging markets, more exotic areas, or developed, such as Europe. But we're on every continent. I think we've got about 55 countries in the gateway, over 150 different payment methods, whether that's local payments, credit card payments, crypto payments. And our niche that we kind of find ourselves in is the Forex, crypto merchants, online gaming, kind of the higher risk, higher volume merchants is who we service.
And was that deliberate on the part of Vasu, or is that just something that happened, so now you're just doubling down on it?
I think that when we started, we were a little bit more open, but we did know, we saw a gap in the market when it comes to the high risk merchants. No one is being an aggregator for them to get access to as many different countries as we're allowing. So how high risk vertical merchants normally have to deal with it is integrate something for Vietnam, integrate something for a few Latin American countries, or integrate something else for somewhere in Europe. But we're kind of putting this all in one regulated compliance first kind of under one roof.
Right.
So that could include bank accounts, IBAN accounts, card issuing, acquiring, licensed OTC transactions, fiat to crypto conversions. But a lot of the times what we see is the only merchants that are able to onboard are the ones that are the lower risk. So we make a point of partnering with solutions that allow for maybe an expanded risk appetite.
Okay, I don't know if I can get off this call merely because you've mentioned the fiat to crypto conversions without asking you about stable coins. Like, do you want to talk about that at all, or?
Absolutely, yeah.
Go
That's
for it.
probably the main part of what we do. So
Go
kind
for
of
it.
if we jump into the whole AI thing, right? I think that for payments, there are really two separate conversations happening. So on the one hand, you've got how our merchants are using agentic AI, right? So businesses are creating these AI agents that are able to negotiate and compare pricing, manage subscriptions, right? Reorder inventory, and execute payments automatically. So what we need to be doing as payment providers in that regard is building infrastructure that has to be real time settlements, right? It has to be instant. There's no room for banking delays if an autonomous. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, I feel like you're my
You'll have to stop me if I get
I'm not stopping. That's me raising my hand, but if I raise it too high, it goes on the screen. So I just want to raise it high enough.
Yeah.
Why do people want to use agents to pay? I really want to understand this. I wanted to talk to somebody about agentic payments because in my mind, again, I'm not a merchant, right? But I'm a consumer. And when I buy something, I'm normally buying it in the same place that I always buy, right? So my card is already on file. If I have a credit card, and if not, I can use a QR code or use some other sort of existing payment method that to me has always been really straightforward. Where does agentic AI make the payment easier, better for me as a consumer, or even if it's a B2B thing? If I'm in the Philippines and I want to deal with somebody in Brazil and there's a stable coin involved, like where does agentic AI from a payments perspective come in and make that better for me?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll use, I think the most relatable example is flights, right? So when's the last time you booked a flight and you're thinking, or maybe a family vacation? That will make it a little more complex. So we'll talk about it from both sides, from the airline side as the merchant who benefits from having agentic AI and from the consumer perspective. So you've got, you want to give you just want to say, book me the best flight to Vancouver for 4 people with the best options. And you don't want to talk about anything else.
You're definitely Canadian. You're definitely Canadian. Sorry, go ahead. I want to book a flight to Vancouver. Sorry, go ahead.
On Sunday, so it's on my mind.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So you want to just give a prompt, and then you don't want to have anything else to do with it. So you just want to give your side permission. You want to allow if you use ChatGPT, you're familiar with language model prompt sort of AI, right? Now, what if I were to just tell my robot, hey, I want you to have the permission to actually use my card, initiate it. But let's say I'm sleeping at the time. So maybe a flight upgrade came up, or lounge access, a better hotel rate, or a last minute voucher offer. And the offer only exists for 30 seconds. The AI can't, wait 2 business days or wait for banking hours or settlement windows. And that pushes the industry into stable coins, because now you're getting the best option. Maybe there are flight upgrades that you bid on. So from your side, you don't have to worry about the best possible option. It'll just get the best possible option when it can. Okay. And then from the other side, so let's say, and I'll just use, again, flights as an example. So some airlines have a system, not some, I know one, I don't know if I should mention it by name, but for example, I say, it sends. Okay, so Philippine Airlines. So they'll send me an option they'll be like, do you want to give us an offer? Do you want to give us $100 or $200 or $300 to block off the seat next to you? It's a long haul 13-hour flight. Do you want to
do that?
They do that. Yeah, it's a wicked.
That's amazing. I would pay more than $100 for that.
I know, right? It's like, well, so you can either bid for upgrade to business class, a larger upgrade, but there's a range. You can bid from $1,000 to $1,500 or whatever it might be. A seat next to you, you can ask for 2 seats next to you blocked off. So now you get to sleep in economy. But this is like a live dynamic type of bidding system, right? And there's not, so how they make use of agentic AI, this is, we'll just call it a theory. Maybe now there are so many people asking or making offers to get upgraded that the flight's becoming overbooked, but the flight the next day is pretty empty. So now the agentic AI has permission to send me a voucher. So for example, I got a voucher offer. Hey, do you mind getting on the plane on the following day instead? We'll give you a little bit extra. So these are all, it's taking in information and making decisions based on live changes in what's going on in the market. Does that make sense?
It does. But I have another question for you, and I want to give you an anecdote. And I use this a lot. So if people have already heard this, forgive me for saying the same thing over, but I once asked when I was working in the finance industry, I had a home leave was one of the benefits that I got. And I told the woman who was going to book my flights at the company where I was working to book a flight from Tokyo to Seattle, Seattle to Jackson. And then Seattle to Jackson, Seattle to Denver, Denver to Jackson, because I wanted to go to Jackson Hole and I wanted to stay at the Almangani.
Right.
Yeah, that's a humble brag. Anyway, but the point is, that the person who booked my flight, because I didn't give them enough information, booked me a flight to Jackson, Mississippi instead.
Oops.
Yeah, oops, it's a really big deal. Now, my luggage ended up in Jackson, Mississippi. When I got to Denver, I was like, I'm not going to Jackson, Mississippi. So I just had to spend like thousands of dollars of my own money to go to Jackson Hole. It doesn't matter. But the point is that you and I may take for granted that we know how to prompt properly because we're in this business and we talk about it a lot, and we're really good or have become good at understanding like how AI understands us.
Mm-hmm.
But on that day, I was like literally, the word I want to use, but I'm not going to say it out loud.
No,
but I had problems, right? Where does the responsibility lie when you've given agentic payments the ability to pay for something that at the end of the day wasn't the exact thing that you wanted, but because you were sleeping when it happened? Like, where's the responsibility? And it's bad enough today when airlines and hotels and stuff like don't even have a customer service line to get this kind of thing resolved. Like, this is one of the things that I worry about with the agentic stuff is like, you told me I could do it, so I went out and I did it kind of thing.
Right. So it's complicated. And this is definitely when, if we were getting into the challenges that everybody's facing, it all comes down to regulations, right? If two parts, like, have you heard anybody mention the term guardrails as a service?
No, but I like the idea of guardrails as a service.
So it's a thing. So it's a product now. We're familiar with banking as a service, payments as a service, software. We're seeing guardrails as a service. So payment platforms, we'll be providing tools that allow businesses to, for example, whitelist approved AI agents or set spending limits, define approval thresholds, things of that nature, restrict categories. So as you imagine, guardrails, this is your lane, stay in it, and you can't go out of it. Obviously, mistakes or like they happen. And so that's why things are slow. Regulations are slower than technology most of the time. And
Almost
so
always,
a lot of so a lot of what I believe the conversations are around right now are, if you gave a procurement agent access to refill an order or restock an order when something was empty, what if it made a mistake, a glitch, 10,000 instead of 10?
Right.
Whose fault was that? The issuer, the acquirer, the software provider, the merchant? Like, who takes responsibility? The insurance company who has to say. Yeah. So that's a lot of what conversations are around is how do you put blame on something that's not human?
Right.
So yeah, it's in the works, I think.
Where are the other places that agentic AI or even AI in general are going to get used in the payment space? And is it more related to, like, I was talking to Yatsu. I don't know if you know who Yatsu is. He's the guy who was the founder of Animoca Brands. His company, they've invested in like 600 companies. And he is a deep evangelist and believer in the idea that crypto was not created for humans. It was created for AI, but AI just wasn't there soon enough for it to get uptake fast enough. But now that agentic AI is there, and we talked about this last week, I can't remember, there's time's a flat circle, right? Like last week or the week before at Super AI in Singapore. And he was like, now that there's agentic AI, now crypto is actually going to be a much bigger thing, because now the technology can talk to technology in a way that it was actually built for that. Is that the way you see this as well? That because you're dealing in the crypto space, that there are stable coins involved, that there are a bunch of steps involved, that now that agentic AI is possible, it makes all of that possible in a way that couldn't have been possible before?
I hadn't heard this theory, but it makes perfect sense. Absolutely. Because right now, I still, as a human, will need to prompt to get that stable coin transaction or crypto transaction to move. But what we can do now is like remove the human touch in a lot of ways, right? And we don't want that to become, okay, now AI is just dealing. There will be like an entire agentic AI economy, essentially, that are all just working with each other, because the payment side's AI is going to have to challenge the merchant side AI to check that it's real, kind of find out, whereas before the payment gateway would be testing to see, is this a human, verifying that it's a human.
Right.
Now they're going to be having to verify, are you are you the right AI that I'm supposed to be dealing with? Now, I'm not going to pretend I know how the plumbing of this type of setup works or that
Neither do I.
infrastructure, but what I do know is that it's kind of called like a cryptographic handshake, where like the machine will challenge the other machine, and that's how you would kind of have that work. So back to what you mentioned about, is it like AI is meant to use cryptocurrency? I totally see that. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
So you just triggered something else in my head. You know, we have been operating, I'm sure you've done this 1,000 times, with CAPTCHA. You know what I mean? We're like, please verify that you're human.
Mm.
You
Which
know
is
what I mean?
ironic, right? Funny.
Say again?
Well, it's funny. Please verify that you're human, because it's kind of easy for a human to verify they're human, and it's much more complex for AI to verify that they're AI, I would think.
Yeah, but also like this idea that they want us to be human to verify the transaction, right? They don't want, because there's now like a good bot and a bad bot, right? In this way. In other words,
Yeah.
if guardrails as a service is actually going to be a thing, it means that I'm not going to have to create my own agent. This is, I think, what the suggestion is. And that is that somebody else has already created an agent that's built with the proper guardrails, that understands what the responsibility is, and that understands where the liability is as well, whether it's with an insurance company or with the merchant or like whatever that is. I don't want to build that myself. I don't have time to think about it, right? The same way I don't want to build my own email server. But then
Yeah.
what does it do for all that verification? Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, please. It's good. It's there are just so many moving parts to the entire thing, and then I don't know like at what stage it becomes it takes on mass adoption, but I do know that this will be the end. I hope, or it is likely, banking hours are not going to work. Traditional banking hours of, like, hey, you call us back on Monday, or we'll get to your wire transfer on a business day. We're not moving money on weekends and holidays. It's like that's no
Insanity.
longer going to work. And stable coins, because cryptocurrencies have that volatility issue, we go back to stable coins again. So one of the ways that we're trying to solve this at Vasu is a new product we have, which is a layer 1 blockchain technology by the name of New Chain. And that's going to allow financial institutions to essentially create their own stable coins backed by any digital currency in the world. That's in short. I don't know if I'm answering a question, but I think really
but that's also really interesting. So any digital currency that's backed by a fiat currency that's not as volatile as, let's say, Ethereum or
it's not volatile at all, because it's 1-to-1.
Right. The delta's 1-to-1, right? For sure.
Yeah.
So what does that do if everybody can create their own stable coin? Sorry,
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, because, there's still always, it's not so much like the entire traditional banking system goes out of the picture and it all becomes digital. It's more like the marriage of the two, because if, I'm sending you stable coin for a payment, now you've got USDT in your USDT wallet, which still doesn't do much for you until we get to the time and place that you're able to use your USDT to pay your bills, right? And we'll get there, and it slowly gets there. But in the meantime, you've got to take your USDT and get money. You want money so you can go do stuff with it, right? So, so I mean, liquidity under the hood, and liquidity, if that's a familiar term for you, it means, okay, so you get what I mean. There's always, you got to have that deep liquidity under the hood for it to take on mass adoption. And what does it look like if everybody starts creating their own stable coins? Maybe it just means they have their own little internal float. It's like a treasury, and it doesn't mean that like they have stable coin, now they're the only stable coin for that currency. It'll just mean they have access to faster rails for their merchants or their consumers or whatever it might be.
I feel like this may be a little bit off topic, but you seem to know a lot about this, so I'm going to trust the fact that you have an opinion here.
I'll try.
Look at you. You look a little nervous. No, this is easy.
I don't know.
Do you get, because I get the sense that this is true, and I can't get anybody to agree with me, but I'm curious what you think. I feel like over time that stable coins are just going to be, they're going to sort of funge into fiat. Because right now you have to take like, let's say US dollars by USDT. Then you send USDT to somebody in an emerging market. They don't have a bank account, but they have a wallet, and then they change that into, they either keep the USDT or they take it offline and turn it into a fiat currency somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it seems like there are way too many steps. At some point, like, why not just use the USDT or whatever the other stable coin is that is stable and not that volatile? And because currencies, like if I give you a $10 bill, it's just a piece of paper with with a picture of, I don't even know, the president on it. But
Neither
the point is
do
that, say again?
I don't either.
I don't either. And I don't really care, to be fair. But the point is that, like, you just trust the fact that that has value.
Yeah.
That's it. And so do I, and so does the US government. But otherwise, it's just a piece of paper with a number on it, right?
Yes.
Shouldn't we just all be using USDT or some kind of stable coin and not have to go through this process of transferring it into a fiat currency? And then I'll let you go.
I would love it when that becomes the way things work. It would make things a lot easier, because probably one of, the pain points that we come across often is just that the slowness, the speed of intermediary banks, right? Relying on
friction.
the friction. And then becomes the question, like, well, if traditional banks are historically benefiting from some of those friction points that stablecoin is trying to solve, then where do we go from there? But that's more of a philosophical question or something for the future. But yeah, I do think that it makes sense. One day we will just be using stable coins. That could be in the very far future. But before we get there, I have to be able to pay my mortgage with stable coin. The bank has to take it.
Yeah.
Right.
But here's again, I said I was going to let you go, but I'm not.
No, it's okay. Yeah.
I'm going to say one more thing.
Okay.
The banks are the one, like JP Morgan is going to issue a stable coin, or they already have. So
yes.
Again, I had this, and I have another guest coming, but I want to go through this with you because I want people to hear this. I remember, like, one of the first times I was in China, they had two currencies, right? The local currency and what they called FEC, the foreign exchange currency.
Yeah.
And we were leaving, so we went to the front desk of the hotel, gave them FEC, and they gave us back, like, the local currency. And we were like, oh, shucks, we want to buy a cup of coffee. And they were like, okay, that coffee can only get paid for in FEC. And we're like, can we give you back the local currency? Like, we can't do that transfer. And you're like, you just gave it to me. It sounds to me like the stablecoin thing. Sorry. It's
like, they want more money in and they don't want money going out. It's only valuable one way, right? Like to increase the supply of USDT, Tether will charge you very little to mint new USDT, but you got to pay if you want to take it the other way, because now they're taking supply out, right?
Yeah.
So, something like that.
Silliness. Okay. Look, you were awesome. Thank you so much for coming and doing this. I took you well over time, but it was just too interesting stuff. Is that okay?
Yes. Yeah. Thanks so much for your time. It was nice to be here.
It was great to have you. You were awesome. Thank you, Kiran.
Bye.
Okay. Bye for now. Okay, Martin, let's bring in Ben Lawson. Ben, how are you? Why are you nervous? So let me ask you a question. If you and I were just like meeting in a coffee shop to talk about, I'm going to try to pronounce, your company's called Sxored, yeah?
Correct.
So if you and I were just like meeting in a coffee shop to talk about Sxored, would you be nervous?
Maybe not.
Maybe not. So that's the way you have to think about this. Look, we wanted to have you on because we wanted to talk about how AI-powered credit analysis can help lenders reduce fraud, improve asset valuation, and make better lending decisions. But maybe you can tell us a little bit more in detail about what Sxored is, and then we can jump into sort of the main conversation.
Cool. Okay. So my name is Ben Lawson. Thanks for having me. I'm the founder and CEO of Sxored. We founded Sxored back in 2024 because as we speak, even now, the process of credit analytics, even for a small size of loan, as small as $50,000 in Indonesia, takes about 2 to 3 months to process.
Got it.
Like, let's say for a mortgage or a working capital loan. And the amount of documents will take up to 40 to 45 documents each.
Wow.
And many of them are still doing it manually. Like, even if they get a soft copy file from the potential borrower,
right,
they will still have to print it out. So I thought, well, this is 2024, 2025. AI.
What are we doing? Yeah.
Exactly, right. The process is still the same as when I started my career in banking 20 years ago. So, yeah, with AI, the process can be faster, better, cheaper. We use AI in many ways. The first one is to read, to extract, to analyze, to summarize, to recommend, and to spot small details that can be missed by human eyes.
Can you talk about the credit analysis part here as well? I presume part of the reason why it takes 2 to 3 months to get approval and 40 to 45 documents is because the regulators are worried about repayment risk, right? And that repayment
Exactly.
risk is based on credit analysis. What problem are you trying to solve in the lending market? Like, does credit analysis need to be completely rebuilt, or does it just need to be improved?
The process needs to be improved, to be accelerated. Um, because right now they use Excel, they calculate the financial capacity of the borrowers.
Hmm.
That will take 10 days alone, because they have to input each line of transaction from the bank statement. Right? And also collateral appraisal will take another 10 days, and then credit reviewer will take a few more days. So if you add the weekends on that, that'll be a month and a half already.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how is AI changing the way you look at credit analysis and lending decisions? You started in 2024.
Hmm.
So LLMs had already been released.
True.
There was no agentic AI out there. Like, how are all these things changing the way you look at the future of credit analysis and lending decisions?
All right. So we use the AI to extract, extract, summarize, analyze, and give recommendations to the bank, um, accurately and consistently, also using some logics also.
Right.
It's based on the financial ratios and the bank's preference, because each bank has its own portfolios, the non-performing loan industries, and different credit reviewer can have a different subject to approval. Like they like this industry. Like, for example, right now, the mining industry is not in the paper because of the ESG thing, right? So yeah, or maybe they have a bad portfolio that has went it turned into a bad debt, so they have to change or reshape their appetite in the risk.
Are you like what when you're using artificial intelligence to understand the credit analysis side of this, are you looking for specific signals, and are you trying to serve underserved markets using alternative data as well? And if you are, how does artificial intelligence help you analyze that alternative data in a way that sort of more traditional data was not being analyzed in the past?
Okay. Alternative data is mostly used for smaller size of loan, the underserved segment, of course.
Mhm.
But we at Scored, we mostly cater the secured loan, productive loan, and the longest time taken to process a credit application, a loan application. So we still process financial data, legal documents, and conventional, traditional data. Um, while we try to combine it in the future with also alternative data, but that won't be the main subject. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you're still trying to help more traditional borrowers and more traditional lenders just like speed up the entire process. Do I have that right?
Yes, that is correct.
So what's the right word? How ready do you think traditional financial institutions are to start employing or deploying artificial intelligence to speed up the process from, like you said, an analysis period that takes 2 to 3 months, then 40 to 45 documents, whether they're digital or physical? How ready are these big institutions, just from a mindset perspective, but also from a technological perspective as well, to start employing this newer technology?
How ready? Well, while the industry talks about modern tech-enabled fraud, the underlying mechanism haven't
Yep.
actually changed in 20 years, and the we try to detect fraud um, by using we call it AI to help identify inflated revenue, turnaround transactions, etc. And they should be ready by now, but since we're talking about dinosaurs, right? Bankings are like dinosaurs. They're so big. And in Indonesia, when you try to sell something to the bank, like the whole bank has to agree to it. It's not just one person decision,
Sure.
right? So they should be ready, but they might be hesitating on the fact that the data could be exposed to AI to foreign companies. So that's what Sxored is here for. We will do on-prem. We will do. We are API ready to be connected to the existing system, and it's just a matter of time and when they all catch up to this kind of movement, AI.
What do you think the biggest challenge is for these banks to apply artificial intelligence to asset valuation at scale? In other words, right, if you're dealing with some of the biggest lenders in the country, and you're also dealing with more traditional borrowers, what's the challenge in applying artificial intelligence so they can properly do asset valuation?
They don't believe AI can replace human, but I do somehow agree with them, especially in Indonesia when you talk about asset valuation. Collateral is still number one in Indonesian loans. And there are some points that AI cannot do, like to see whether this house is landed on a swamp or a solid land, or whether a collateral is located in a high residential area, but next to it there's a slum buildings. In Indonesia, that's common to happen, right? And so that's why I think human in the loop is still needed. So we just help them accelerate the process, and also do, hopefully by using Sxored, they can do a preliminary check before wasting their 10 days time to make a decision.
Is it the case that human capital in Indonesia still remains fairly priced or reasonably priced compared to what it would take to employ the newest technology, particularly agentic AI, if they're going to have to do it with a non-open source model, right, and actually pay for tokens? Is it still the case that human capital is less expensive, and that may actually be a roadblock to deploying artificial intelligence at scale in this case?
That's a nice way to put it, yes.
What do you mean that's a nice way to put it?
It's still, most companies still think that, I would rather hire 10 people than using a technology.
Right.
And even when I try to offer solutions to some of the clients, they might, while a bit of laughing, and they say, "What about my job?"
Nice. So they're nervous about their own employment. But
Yeah.
but I think more like at scale, in the sense that, like, is it just easier for them inside the way they run their businesses to hire those 10 people, rather than figuring out how to deploy agentic AI or even generative AI in a place where they haven't done it before?
I think it goes back to the client, to the bank itself, whether they want to really make a transformation digitally, because
Right.
using AI could be more reliable, more consistent, more detailed, comparing to our eyes looking at piles of documents and taking so long to process.
Yeah.
So I see that some of the clients that I have now, they are more into the speeding, accelerating, because the current process takes too long and they want to scale. They will only work if they're speeding up. They're trying to accelerate the business.
And can we talk a little bit more about fraud? How does artificial intelligence help fraud detection? When even the fraud itself is becoming easier to do. So, I feel like there's always this little arm race between I'm trying to commit fraud and you're trying to determine fraud. How is that working, particularly in the space with artificial intelligence?
Okay. The mechanism of fraud, it hasn't changed much. They inflate the transactions, they duplicate transactions, they transfer in and out,
Right.
and then they try to use a fake subsidiary. They create fake invoice, and using AI or agentic AI, they can automatically validate whether this document is legit or not. And also we can mix with logics. Of course, we eliminate transactions that are not business related or suspiciously we suspect it's a fraud. So we can identify those red flags in the transactions, in the documents, to help them realize that, oh, I missed this part. Yeah, so that's how we help them detect fraud using.
Got it. What about on the non-performing loan side? Like, banks every bank everywhere in the world has a whole section of people that deal with non-performing loans. Should there be a place where artificial intelligence can help them reduce not NPLs without making the lenders like too conservative now going forward? Because they already seem kind of conservative to me from the get-go. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think the speed of AI, the improvements have been really crazy, right? Every month we see a newer version.
Yeah.
There's a newer AI coming in. So um, while they're trying to catch up with the latest technology, but they're already running their own day-to-day business, right? Um, it's still not in the same level. Um, so it's gonna take them a while to adapt to this new wave of AI. And for the NPLs itself, it's right now they can improve it not using AI, I believe.
but there's got to be a role for artificial intelligence there as well. In other words, just like screening through all of the existing loans that have, pulling out the NPLs and seeing if there's a way to find a solution for that using artificial intelligence, using the large language models to try to understand like where the opportunities exist, and then
What?
disintermediating that should be possible. No.
Sure. What we do at Sxored to help NPLs is maintaining the distress asset. So the assets that have been collected and ready to be sold, that needs to be reappraised every once in a while, right? Every
Right.
3 months or 6 months. Otherwise, they have to send people to check that property. Go to that city and have a look at these 10 uh, buildings that has come into our distressed asset. And it's going to take a while. So at least that's how we help the NPLs division for now.
Okay. And
That's
where do
cool.
you see the next wave of AI adoption in banking or in lending in Indonesia heading? Like, where do we think the first adoption is going to be here at scale? And then once that happens, where do you think it's going to go after that?
If I look at it, Indonesia is a bit behind other than other countries such as Singapore or America, right? Right now, what they're trying to use AI is to adopt in simpler tasks like product inquiry or customer complaint or talking to a customer service or even onboarding new clients.
Right.
Th- That's what they're at now, right now. But I think the next wave should be fortifying the underlying credit infrastructure because that's the main income for the bank.
Yeah.
We can talk about how forward-thinking banks are transitioning toward data defensible, but in the end, I think they need to fortify the underlying credit infrastructure itself.
Right. So there's been a large conversation in the United States, and frankly, it's starting in Asia, bubbling up in Asia. One of the guys that I spoke to earlier actually talked to me about his company deploying. I shouldn't have used that word, but using forward deployed engineers to send to his potential clients to explain to them and sit with them as they use and adopt new technology like artificial intelligence. Is there an opportunity to do that in the banking space in Indonesia where employees of Scored actually sit as FDs, so foreign forward deployed engineers inside of the banks so they can understand like, hey, when this pops up, here's a way you can use this thing. And that this will then help you get clients or buy-in so that they start using these tools as opposed to still resisting, if that makes sense.
We're doing that right now. We try to understand the bank's condition, situation, systems, and each bank has different appetite, standard operations, policies, NPLs, portfolios, etc. So each client's very customized, even though we don't see them as a full-time employee, but we do that for each onboarding. That's why the cycle takes about a year from
Does it really?
pitching to signing, and then another maybe 3 months to change their policy internally.
And is that standard amount of time for employing or deploying new products inside of a bank, or is that much longer period of time than it would normally take to just have a regular fintech come in and deploy a new product for them?
When we talk about bank, I think 8 months to 1 year is the common business cycle sales for B2B enterprise in Indonesia.
Got it.
But fintech
And-
could be a lot faster.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think is going to have to happen for it to be a lot faster?
Not selling to banks.
But that's the whole point of the company, right? Is to sell these new services to the banks. I guess,
Exactly.
yeah. Got
All
it.
right.
Can I ask you one more thing?
Sure.
What has to change inside of the bank for them to understand like that they can do this credit stuff faster if they use AI? What has to change internally? And I'll
They
let you
need
go.
they need to have a division or department specifically for transformation, digital transformation, because banks, the directors, the head of departments, mostly uh, occupied by millennials or even baby boomers.
I was gonna say by boomers, yeah.
Boomers, and they don't adapt. They're not happy with this AI thing because they don't believe in this kind of stuff. They always
Well, it
say
makes them nervous, yeah.
back in the days we do this manually, 2,000 pages. Okay, you do that. but now it's 2026, man. And if you want your business to grow, let us help you. Yeah. So
But that's going to be an issue. Okay, look, I will let you go. Thank you so much for coming and doing this today. We really appreciate your time. Ben Lawson,
Thank
CEO at Sxored. Thank you again for coming in and joining us on ATP Insights.
thank you to making it easy for me.
It is my complete pleasure. Okay, Martin, let's bring in Ittay. How are you today? I am doing super. And where are you based right now, just so I can get a sense of what time it is?
It feels like I live on airplanes, but at the moment I'm in Israel.
Okay. Are you in Tel Aviv?
Just right outside of it, yeah.
Why do I feel like the entire Israeli population is within a 5-mile radius of Tel Aviv? I don't know. Everyone that I
I
talk to
think
in the startup
people-
community is there.
I think people forget. I think almost all of Israel is within 5-mile radius.
Yeah, but fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. Look, thanks for coming to the show. We wanted to have you on because we want to understand how real-time asset intelligence helps logistic companies make faster, smarter, and more autonomous operating decisions. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about, am I pronouncing this right? Hoopo?
Yes, that is perfectly right.
Before we jump in. Yeah. And did I pronounce your first name right? Ittay?
Ittay is my first name, but you can call
Ittay.
me Ty if that makes your life
No.
easier.
It's not a problem for me at all. Ittay. Okay. Go ahead. Tell us about Hoopo.
Great. Hoopo is one of the world's largest provider of fleet tracking and fleet intelligence solutions. We are about 55 people manufacturing and delivering tens of thousands of devices each month. Our devices have a battery that can last for more than 12 years, making it very, very cost efficient for scale and fleet. Some of the largest fleets in the world are using us to convert their assets from trailers to airport equipment to containers into a smart fleet. And we don't just track the location, but we know the status of the containers, the door being open or closed, was there damage to a cargo? And we create this data in order to become the leading data layer for autonomous operations, as you mentioned earlier on.
Yeah. Can we just run through this in a little bit more detail? Because this is kind of fascinating for me.
Of course.
So you're a device builder as well, yeah? There's a software
We are.
layer. Sorry, go ahead.
Mhm. No, sure. We're a hardware-enabled SaaS business. So basically, for containers, we offer this device. It's a solar-powered device that goes on each container within the corrugations behind the lock bars. It can run for 12 to 15 years autonomously. We have unique combination of laser sensors and light sensors that detect the movements of the door and determine the status of the container. We integrate the data coming live from the container whenever it moves, while it's on the move, when someone does something that they shouldn't do, and we connect it to a contextual layer and an alert engine that gives real-time insights to our customers, from exception management to predicting inventory levels in a month.
Sorry, I'm thinking about what this looks like. So you have that box, it sits on the outside of the container, yeah?
That is true. So every dry box, and again, all we do is unpowered assets. With a powered asset like a truck, you can easily connect to
Easy.
the battery.
You have telematics and stuff. That's simple, yeah. Relatively
Exactly.
straightforward, yeah.
But But when you talk about fleets that operate tens of thousands up to millions of assets, you have to have something that is rugged, reliable, long-lasting, and mainly affordable. So a device that is extremely affordable goes on the door of the container, 2-minute installation with 2 rivets. And from that moment on, this iron cage that is basically a container becomes a smart asset that is delivering real-time valuable data to our customers.
So let's simplify this, if you don't mind. I like to make things simple so people can get a better understanding. Let's say I'm a logistics provider. I'm a 3PL. And I have 10 of these devices on the back of my truck. So each one of the trucks has and let's just call it trucks because it's just easier for people to understand.
Sure.
Each one of the trucks has one of these devices on the back, yeah? And that device monitors what's happening on that, you said, that metal cage, inside of which is all this kind of stuff. It could be delivery stuff. It could be anything, right?
Yeah, listen, 80% of finished goods move in containers.
Yeah, for sure.
These assets are owned by the largest shipping lines and carriers in the world. And the minute that the container leaves the terminal, let's say the port, you basically lose sight of it. This is a blind spot to you because the entire supply chain is extremely siloed and fragmented. So you may have, 3PLs, third-party trucking companies, drayage companies. They're all interacting with your assets, the asset you're charging for, but you have no clue what's going on with it. And this is what we're changing.
So what kind of data does that box actually transfer? And how does it transfer back? And the other thing is, again, if I have 10 trucks in my 3PL small company, I'm a big thinker, but I'm starting small here. Do those devices communicate with each other as well? Right? Let's say these 2 trucks are going to the same place, or they're going to a different place, or they're going to meet later, or there are multiple places that are going to get delivered. Do those devices communicate with each other? And is that obvious from, I presume there's a desktop app or some kind of dashboard or something to which it's sending information? What type of information am I getting about that box? Not the box on the back, but the container itself? And are they communicating with each other as well?
So the answer to your questions are all yes. The data that is coming out of the asset that we're tracking, whether, again, it's a truck, a container, a drive-in, or any other kind of asset, is location, temperature alerts. We prevent fires in containers, which is a huge hazard today in global supply chain. We know shock events or impact. We know tilt. If we're tracking waste containers, we can even confirm where the trash was disposed of. And as I said before, we track the door status and some other features as well. Now, we work with some of the largest chassis companies in the US market. So the trailers that collect the containers from the port.
Right.
Some of the biggest challenges is that when you board a container to a trailer and now you're tracking the trailer, sometimes people get it wrong. You might have the wrong container on this trailer and you're expecting a delivery and then it arrives, but it's not really what you were hoping for. So we can also match.
How does that happen?
Well, it happens because, we're here to talk about AI, but eventually in global supply chain, I don't see just an AI implementation problem. I see a Bob implementation problem because Bob, who's working in a rail yard somewhere in the middle state in the US, his job is to get things moving quickly. And if he misses a number on a container when he reports through the ADI, no one's going to fire him. No one even knows who he is. So there are a lot of challenges to get real-time yet accurate data in global supply chains today. And this is kind of what we're trying to solve.
What happens when a company installs this box on the back of their containers? What changes operationally? Like what sort of better outcomes do they have? And is it obvious to them that, like, whoa, this is way more efficient, we should have been doing this forever, kind of thing? Do you know what I mean?
For sure. I'm going to quote the COO of one of the largest trailer leasing companies in the US.
Okay.
Who's been our customer for more than 4 years now. A month into our first initial pilots, he said, well, we didn't know what we didn't know. And I know it kind of sounds, simple, but this is the truth. Yeah. So you can, as you just said, they envision a lot of value coming from improved utilization, from using the asset and doing more turnarounds, because this is what they basically make money for. So cost per mileage, revenue per cycle, this is what we're improving. But then once you start digitizing your whole organization, and again, we're talking about the largest fleets in the world, you learn that there are so many other revenue opportunities. You reduce insurance premiums because
I was going to ask you about insurance as well, right? Because the thing is, if I know where my box is at all times, and if I know where my container is at all times, and I know it's connected to the right trailer, to the right cab, actually,
True. Both.
and if I know where it is, if I know if the door's being open, like in my head, I'm sorry, I keep seeing, what is that movie? I keep seeing this scene in that. You know what I'm talking about.
I mean, I have several movies in my head, but it can be the Fast and Furious.
The Irishman.
Irishman, for sure, yeah.
But you remember that movie, The Irishman, where he like clipped the back of the truck? He took the stakes out. He got there, and they're like, there are no stakes in the back of the truck. Like
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
That's not possible if they have this box on the back of the thing. And this is the kind of thing that I want people to understand. But it's more than that, right? Because now your insurance premiums go down because theft is harder. Graft is harder. All this stuff. Yeah.
We prevent fires, which, again, believe it or not, once every 2 months, this container goes on fire on a vessel, and you detect it too late to be able to handle it. So you just let it consume several containers with millions of dollars worth of cargo. Right. But also, don't just think about what you prevent from happening to the cargo. You're also preventing things like illicit trade. Believe it or not, 80% of cocaine is being smuggled into Europe within containers, according to the European Union. And we work with the European Union to incentivize those, smart assets being imported into Europe so that we can, send the customs people to the right direction and allow them not to waste time on unnecessary containers. Yeah, and it's not so trivial to do this, but yes.
Thank you. Where does agentic AI come in here, right? Because you're getting all this data, and you have the ability for some of the trucking and or some of the 3PL companies to start making autonomous decisions. What does that look like, and what structure is that data coming in so that at least at some level, some decisions can be made autonomously? Not all of them, but where does agentic AI get deployed, and why does that matter? How does it help?
Let me ask a preliminary question first, and that is a great direction that
I
you're
love
leading.
it. There's nothing like two Jews asking each other questions. Sorry, go ahead.
It's yeah. If we were
I'm talking to my grandmother now. It's like I ask a question, you answer with a question. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, our most favorite joke is that if you put two Jews in the room, you might get more than 3 opinions.
Exactly, you could get 7 opinions. But go ahead.
So I think for the preliminary question I'll ask is if it makes sense to you that, let's say, one of our shareholders approaches me over email and asks me to send them their Q1 financials for their LP reporting. Yep. Do you agree that we're already at the point in time where Claude or any other kind of agentic solution can understand the reasoning, go and search my drive, get the Q1 financials, draft the email, and then just ask me for permission to send it? Do we agree on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's relatively straightforward, particularly with Opus 4.0 or even Fable 5 or even ChatGPT 5.5. And frankly, DeepSeek can probably do the same thing.
Absolutely, you are right. And so if you think about it, when you go to logistics, a lot of the tasks in global supply chain are just coordination tasks or exception management. Now, the challenge is that, unlike the example I gave you, it's not so straightforward where the context and the data is located. If you want to start trusting AI, then you need to understand that AI is only as good as the data that it has.
Sure.
And I think we're only now seeing the big fleets of the world creating this first data layer that is accurate enough to start relying on. Because if you want to start calling truck drivers and telling them to go in different routes, you better make sure that they are carrying the right container first.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want some dude who's supposed to have like, who knows what, like chickens in the back, but he's actually got Nestle chocolate in the back. Like, that's a bad idea. But you also bring up a good.
Would be happy.
No. Neither party's going to be happy. It's like I was expecting chocolate and I got chicken. It doesn't make any sense to me. But you bring up another really interesting point. Look, truck drivers, and again, I think people are going to think like, oh, these guys don't know anything about technology. But like your FedEx drivers, your UPS drivers in the United States, they've been using tracking technology, package technology, scanning technology. Same thing in Japan for stuff like Yamato and all those other guys. They've been using tech for years, right? So these guys and gals have been deploying technology for efficiency purposes forever. When they introduce new things like this and the agentic AI is helping them make decisions, how does it change their level of efficiency as well?
Absolutely. It allows them, for example, a lot of factories and warehouses are moving to just in time. So in order to create very autonomous, very efficient operations, you have to make sure when things are going to arrive and whether the cargo that is arriving, just like you said, is the chocolate that they're expecting for. But if you also move from the 3PLs or the freight forwarders again to the fleets that basically move global trade, you're talking about movements from mainly the east to the west of the world.
Fair
You're
enough.
talking about importing, 10 full containers on every one container that you send back to export. Hundreds of billions of dollars are being wasted on moving empty containers. But the optimization of global supply chain can not only create a much more sustainable world, it can create a much more profitable organization that is currently running on Excel files and huge inefficiencies. So we're looking at AI. And I think Gartner said that, by 2030, 70% of those coordination tasks will be fully agentic. Now, whether they are right or wrong about the 70%, I don't know. But they're definitely right that there is a lot of value in starting to automate those stuff.
Right. So I'm going to disagree with Gartner right off the bat and say there's no way that in, 2026, that in 4 years, the entire global logistics system is going to change from what they're doing right now using Excel and then change to autonomous systems. But I understand their point. Yeah, you have to agree, right? Because you've been inside some of these companies. But that's the other thing too, is like if they're just starting to get to the point where they're gathering data in a way that's useful for them to deploy any kind of artificial intelligence, what is it going to take, do you think, to get them ready, both from an infrastructure standpoint, right? Because they haven't had to build this type of sort of fault-tolerant, resilient infrastructure to be able to handle this. And that's going to require CapEx, to be able to do this. You can't just put a couple of, Mac Minis in there and everything's going to work. What's going to have to change inside of these big companies for them to actually deploy this at scale so that I actually think this is going to make products cheaper, profits higher, and like you said, the whole supply chain way more sustainable because everything's just going to be way more efficient and there are going to be fewer empty containers going back, whatever back means, right? Because it's going to go from west to east now with other stuff in it that you couldn't have planned before. So what has to happen at these big companies for this to actually happen? Or even the smaller companies, because you said it's really fragmented.
Absolutely. And I think we can agree that, again, whether it's going to be 2030 or 2035, we live in a very disruptive era. And things change exponentially. And we already see with, our customers, again, they run global trade. And for years when we started working with them, we thought, okay, this is going to be very slow. They're not very technical. But every day we're surprised and we find the contrary, because once you have this data with AI or agentic capabilities, it becomes also very, very easy to validate what has ROI. I think, again, a lot of projects in AI are either not going to work or not going to return the investment. And then, you're going to still let humans intervene.
Yep.
But I think you're going to see the change becoming much quicker than people anticipate.
Yeah, and again, look, I basically grew up as an adult in Japan, right? So these companies like Yamato Cuban, right? These Takuban companies, they're highly technologized. I think most people, again, think about trucking companies. It's just like, a bunch of wise guys driving around in big vehicles. But I don't think it's that at all. I'm curious where else you think artificial intelligence is going to get used now that there's going to be all this data collection that you're having. And like what changes in those boxes that you're building as well? Like what other new, because they're here today, but like you're not just going to build a box and now it's static forever. You're going to put more sensors on it. You're trying to get more information. Is there a way to track like the status of the inside and the stuff that's already inside the container as well? Like what's going to change inside the boxes that you're building as well?
Well, I'm not going to expose a roadmap on this conversation, but you are absolutely right. You are absolutely right. The more people discover the capabilities and start automating stuff, the more data that they want in. So just so you know, within our device, we have a unique Bluetooth antenna that covers the container from within. So if someone transports cotton or coffee beans and they want to have humidity sensors, they can just throw them in a container and they will communicate with our access point. So basically, again, the container becomes a smart one. So you can always keep on adding more and more stuff.
So that was the other thing I was going to ask you. So thank you for segueing really nicely for me. If I'm a forward-thinking 3PL, I'm just going to use 3PL as a catch-all, if that's okay, just because it's easy to say and you understand what it means and the listeners and viewers understand what it means as well. But if I'm a forward-thinking 3PL, the containers that I put inside of your metal case are also going to have sensors on them. And I can buy those sensors through the supply chain in China probably very cheaply, whether it's IoT stuff, whether it's Bluetooth or it's NFC chips, like whatever it is. How closely do you work together with those teams to say, like as you said, Now that we have these devices inside, and it can actually be inside the inside box, what other data can we then use to make that dashboard that we have and the software that you're building to monitor that even better? How closely do you work with those guys to do that?
We are already there. And stickers, Bluetooth stickers that you can buy off the shelf or from different startup companies can start communicating with our device and create full real-time visibility for whether the cargo is truly there. When the trucker unloads cargo in LTL shipments, less than truckload, there may be mistakes done. And it takes sometimes a month to figure out where the box was left. And by that time, you file insurance claims and you start calling people. That can all be automated within months to a couple of years.
And can I ask you one more thing? Because we talked about insurance, but again, how closely are you working with the insurance company as well to say our ability at Hoopo to disintermediate fraud because of all the tracking that we're doing and the efficiencies that we give these companies so that they actually know, just for, if nothing else, that the cargo inside of the container is the cargo that's supposed to be inside the container. How close are you working with the insurance companies to say premium should be lower, payout should be fat? Do you know what I mean? To like automate this stuff in a way that maybe the insurance even gets paid faster and it's cheaper.
By the end of this year, there will be some insurance classifiers for global freight that will be reducing premiums for smart containers. And we are working closely with them and experimenting on different stuff to prove the value of this data.
Got it. And is this PNC insurers that you're working with?
No, it's mainly a global freight insurance. Cannot name the names, but
no,
by
I
the end
wouldn't
of
ask
the
you
year,
the names. Yeah, not a problem at all. Okay. Ittay, this was awesome. I mean, I could talk to you about this forever. Obviously, I'm super interested in it. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Thank you so much for coming to the show. There may be something for you and I to talk about offline in the insurance space.
Would love to do that. And thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
It was a complete pleasure for me as well. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, Martin, let's bring in Damian. Damian, how are you? Damian, can you hear me okay?
Can you hear me?
You did. I can hear you now. Okay,
perfect.
Great.
All right.
And where are you based?
I'm based in Hong Kong.
Okay, super duper. So your internet connection should be really good. Look,
yep.
It's great to have you here. We wanted to talk to you about how proactive cyber defense helps companies secure AI systems, which are, super dynamic before attackers can exploit them. But maybe you can tell us a little bit more about, well, two things. One, Blackwired, and why every company that's in the sort of cyberspace has to have black in their name. Please go ahead.
Man, I wish I could tell you the answer to that one, but you are so right. I guess, I don't know, something to do with, I don't know, the dark nature of the world that we inhabit here.
But you're wearing a black shirt. I'm wearing a black shirt. I feel like the whole thing's black today. Anyway,
there you go. It's all perfect. Yeah, that is it, man. You got it. So, but thank you as well for having me on. It's a real pleasure to talk to you here. So yeah, a little bit about Blackwired. So we are a cyber intelligence company. We live right at, I would say, the bleeding edge of where the threat actors, exist. And so, our expertise is very much in how you introduced us. It is in the sort of the preemptive or the preventative kind of layer of cyber threat intel. So it's a lot more specific than just understanding what the overall state of the internet weather is, if you will. It's all about the bad guys, right? And we've been doing it honestly for a long time. Blackwired's been around since 2022, but our IP and our principals, who have military and law enforcement backgrounds, have been doing this for 25 years. So we know the bad guys pretty well, and we know how they are using and abusing these new technologies like AI, especially agentic, to get even further ahead than they already are. And they're already pretty far ahead, frankly.
So every time I talk to somebody in the cyberspace, I talk about this. There's an arms race going on, and that arms race is never ending. There's literally a guy in my gym who's in the cybersecurity space, and every time I see him, he's more tired than the last time I saw him. And I'm not being facetious at all.
No, you're not.
But one of the things that he's reflected to me is that particularly in the last sort of 6 to 7 months, because of the, I wouldn't say the rollout, but like just the introduction of agentic AI into the world on a broad basis, that things have changed so dramatically that it's made his job much harder. How has it changed the way you and the team look at this stuff? Because, you know, again, one of the other guys that I know in the space says to me that like, this is a war, but the surface keeps changing. How has the surface for this war changed now that that agentic AI has been released to the world? How's it made it harder for you guys on the defensive side to stop the guys? Because on the offensive side, those guys have no rules.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Like they can press every button they want. But on the defensive side, how do you be proactive in a place where agentic AI is there? Sorry.
That's it, man. Cyber has always been a game of whack-a-mole, hasn't it? And the way that the current paradigm is today and has been for decades is one of detect and respond. You hear that all the time, and most of the security tooling and most of the teams that are really knowledgeable, high level of specialist skill, and who use tools and systems, are all essentially looking to detect an incident or to detect a breach or a potential breach or some suspicious behavior that's happening inside their network after it's already happened, right? So that's just the state of play, and that's not really changing anytime soon. We have something to say about that, about how you actually can get more proactive and preemptive if you have the right intelligence. But the general state of affairs is you're looking for something that's going on, and then you're trying your very best to whack it like a whack-a-mole. And with the advent of AI broadly, but agentic AI maybe a little more specifically, you're now inhabiting a world where, vulnerabilities, which used to be, it took a certain amount of, specialist skill to uncover a vulnerability that could be exploited, right? Or, and to do that quickly before security researchers know about it, before they can publish their research so that companies can go patching to close the holes. What we're really talking about are 0 days here. The speed and the efficacy and frankly, the creativity with which these new 0 days are starting to emerge in light of, these autonomous, units, which can talk to each other and learn from each other and that know the code better than the people who wrote it. The speed and the velocity at which these things are coming is just another level. It's completely another level. So and that's why the whole Anthropic mythos thing is kind of blown the world up in terms of it, because
what's your view on that, by the way? What's your view? Did you guys have access to Fable 5 or to Mythos 5?
There are people on my team who do, but I personally do not. I'm not at that level, but I definitely there are guys I talk to every day who do. But no, I mean, it is honestly, and people use the word game changing a lot. It's a bit hackney, but it's true in this case. Whereas in the past there was a certain amount of friction involved, right, with coming up with a new fancy vulnerability. Now, honestly, it's open season, and it's not just 0 days in the traditional sense. I mean, what we see,
not at all,
these agentic tools doing very, very kind of scary how good they are. They are essentially, if you think about attacks and how they are perpetrated, right? What we're seeing now is it's more of like a use and an abuse of legitimate protocols, right? Authenticated protocols that are already just there. And it's, they're figuring out ways to sail right through. Yeah.
This is a question I was going to ask you. Sorry, Damian. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, please. Not all.
I'm excited. And I'm so interested in this cyber game. And it feels like a game to me, or a war is probably the better word, right? But here's the thing. In the old days, the periphery was where the defense had to sit. And if you could block your periphery, you were kind of safe. But now, like you said, like you can create holes with some of the, and I'm not convinced, right, that if you take Fable 5 down, or if you take Mythos 5 down, or you take ChatGPT 5.5 and don't give it to the bad, like they're going to get access to these things whenever they want it. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is, once they understand what that vulnerability is, they can literally get credentials, as you said, of like just a verified person inside of your company, if they're good at that, and create an agent that could just wreak havoc internally that wasn't possible before. Like, how do you play defense on that?
So it's well, the short answer to your question is the only truly effective way to counteract that is to cut the kill chain. I mean, to disrupt the kill chain, to sever the communication path. And in order to do that, you have to know where they're coming from. You have to know exactly what infrastructure they're hiding behind, because it's often legitimate. And that legitimate infrastructure can be hijacked unbeknownst to the person hosting it. And you have to understand their weapons and their tools really, really well. If you can do that, and to a degree of specificity that we do at Blackwired, then you can sever the kill chain. You know, that's the only way that we know of to reliably counteract this level of threat at this volume that's working essentially at machine speed 24/7. No amount of patching or traditional defensive activity is going to work. And we don't often like to speak in absolutes in cyber. You know, we're all trained not to do that because there's always a certain degree of, you know, you don't always know everything out there because it's a dark, dark world. But I can definitely say with a pretty high degree of certainty that what I just said is true. Yeah, it's a little bit scary.
So how closely, just knowing what I know about, and I should tell you, we spoke to David Agronovich, right, who is the global head of threat at Meta, and we spent a lot of, we did an individual episode with him. We spent like 40 to 45 minutes just talking to him. I didn't learn, obviously I don't know everything he knows, but like some of the stuff he told me actually shocked me. How closely do you have to work with governments in some places or in some cases? Because there is, I wouldn't call it state sponsored, but it's happening in specific countries. We don't need to name the countries. I think because everybody knows what we're talking. You're in Hong Kong, so you know what I'm talking about.
Of course.
And I'm not talking about China.
True.
But how closely do you have to work with governments to be like, okay, look, we know that this is happening in this place in your country, and literally, if you just like shut them down, it's going to shut down an entire vector of offense that's happening there.
Well, that may in fact be the case, but if it comes down in one place, it's just going to pop up in another one. So it's again the whack-a-mole
but at least
thing.
there's time.
But no, you're right.
I mean?
No, the government thing. I mean, we do. That's the thing. We actually, that's kind of where we got our start. Even pre-Blackwired, it was really government and law enforcement that was, you know, what we were doing. And it was mostly focused on the state-sponsored guys. But it certainly helps to have those connections. But you know, ultimately, you know, if your intelligence collection apparatus is good enough and your ability to curate the intelligence is sharp enough, you know, you can't just go buy it off the shelf. But you know, it takes time to build up that kind of capacity. You don't always need, you know, someone from a highly privileged government or defense type position to give you the heads up. In fact, that's some of the engagements that we have in this region and in other regions in that capacity are with those types of organizations where we are helping them to gain attribution on specific threat actors based on their activity. So it's but it's a, you know, it's a really hard game, honestly. You know, and it requires a lot of tradecraft, let's say.
I agree. Okay, this is a really interesting topic for me. So let's go here, if you don't mind. Some the financial services industry as a whole has been using digital technology since the late 80s and early 90s to connect to their customers. Right. And I worked on a portfolio trading desk. I ran a portfolio trading desk. And one of the ways that we took orders from our clients was we did fixed implementations to get them to then. Why are you laughing at me?
I'm laughing because I did fix for 25 years. I mean, I spent 20 years designing trading systems for large institutions before I got into cyber. So everything.
Exactly. But that means that there's a sort of a digital vector direct connection that I give my clients or gave my clients, literally send things into my systems, which then, you know, this, right? That had very specific parameters, very specific codes, all this kind of stuff. So that then I could take those orders, completely verify them using the fixed protocol, and then send those orders to market. But it seems like a natural vector for me for someone to spoof being a client and just to be able to send something over. And I'm curious, like, what that looks like from the financial service industry. Obviously, there's money involved. Do you know what I mean? Like, an asset's involved. Like, how vulnerable is that?
That's a really good question. Since I made this pivot about 5 years ago, that was a natural one for me too, because I was coming off of this world of exactly what you just described. I suppose if there's good news in that specific sphere, it's that Fix is naturally encrypted. Usually, the communication channels that it's going over are protected, either
Sure.
leased lines and stuff like that. So those things are naturally a bit harder to compromise, just due to their inherently more secure nature. But that doesn't mean it's not impossible. And what we sort of talked a little bit or alluded to in your prior question about how threat actors are increasingly using legitimate protocols and services and things that are already authenticated to kind of silently find their way in and then stay there while they establish a foothold and lateral movement and figuring out where the good stuff is before they take it, and then before they drop the ransom on you, and all that typical progression of the attack. People don't just wake up with a ransomware on their hands. It's usually something that's been planned and executed for months before it's got that chance. But in that institutional financial world, you do hear, and there are cases of ones, and maybe the fixed protocol wasn't specifically implicated, but vendors, right? Vendor platforms, especially ones that hold on to, sensitive information about trades that have just happened, or, in that settlement process and whatnot. Those systems can be compromised. And that's what we would consider to be perhaps a third party or a supply chain type threat, right? Where your platform vendor, who you pay good money to, and you've done your security assessment against them, and they filled out their questionnaire, and they did their pen test and all that stuff, and they do the periodic check-ins to make that sure that your systems are safe. Those are just point in time estimates, right? 5 minutes after that questionnaire was read, the actual landscape could have changed. So unless you're monitoring your third parties and your crucial vendors, the ones that are kind of operationally important to you, unless you're monitoring them continuously, it's really impossible to know how safe your data is, honestly. And that's true way beyond just financial services, right? It's a really good example. I'm glad you brought it up. But clients I work with in the manufacturing sector and other ones who have large, complex supply chains, this is what keeps them up at night, right? They can have the best security in the world themselves, but if they've got a secure connection to a payment provider or a parts manufacturer or somebody that they need to complete their supply chain, and they get popped, then you got a big problem on your hands. Sideways risk, we call it in the industry, right? And there's no shortage of ones that we could point to that have happened in the past year, right? You got Marks and Spencer, you got Jaguar Land Rover, you got Asahi Beer. These are all
what happened
supply
to Jaguar
chain attacks. I think their production capacity was actually taken down for a number of months, because it's in the news. We can, anyone's free to go look. I'm not saying anything that's privileged here, but I believe, if memory serves, it was I think it was a support, like a support hotline that got hacked into or whatever, and then through the credentials of that support individual who had a certain level of privileged access, the threat actors were able to get in, gain a foothold, and ultimately get their hands on the crucial servers, the production servers that controlled the actual assembly line or something like that. I might have some of those details a little bit wrong, but the idea is that if those sideways risks are there and they are perpetrated effectively, unless you are monitoring them continuously and you've got some very strong business continuity type protocols in place, it's a risk for everybody. And it's one that you can't even see and you can have very little control over. Scary.
Damian, do you think that, and this again just popped in my head, but do you think that with the attacks becoming more and more sophisticated, that simple attacks now become easier because people are taking their eye off the ball? I'm just thinking about, I still get emails saying your Instagram password has been changed. Do you know what I mean? Like really simple stuff where I know for a fact it's not Instagram sending me this, but some people are so overwhelmed with do you know what I mean?
That's an area where I think AI in particular has made this Yeah, I mean, yeah, like you, like me, like anybody who's kind of natively digital, right? You could spot a spam spoof, kind of change
Easy.
your password email a mile away, right?
Yep.
But they're getting better, right? I mean, they're getting better. They're getting more sneaky. So you still got to have your own spidey senses. Nothing's going to stop that, right? But the quality of those spoofs, and actually this comes up in Japan a lot. It's interesting. We've got a number of clients in Japan. I'm actually going there next week. And for a long time, Japan, just by nature of the fact that Japanese is a really hard language, spam, emails, things like that, there was just a natural level of awareness of somebody to be able to say, that doesn't look right, kind of a thing, purely due to the nature that, the threat actor in Russia or wherever, isn't as good at faking a Japanese email. Well, with AI, it blows the roof completely off of that, because it can craft an absolutely pitch perfect email, right? That could land in someone's inbox, click a link, and then before you know it, you're popped. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's for real. It's true.
No, it does completely. I just think that like as things get more and more complex, people lose the sort of the ability to understand like simple things, because they're so busy worried about like, you know what I mean? It's like people are worried about nuclear war, but they're not worried about getting punched in the face. Kind of thing,
Yeah.
if that makes any sense to you.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there emerging threat vectors that people should know about that they're not talking about right now?
Well, I mean,
that particularly comes from employing agentic AI, right? Because this is new, yeah.
It is, right? It's new, and I think that it is important. Now, and I'll qualify fully what I'm about to say, because I'm not like a, I'm not really an expert in kind of how large corporations govern and manage these tools, which they have to, obviously, right? But anybody on LinkedIn who spends 5 minutes doom scrolling probably sees 6 or 10 infographics about this topic, right? How to secure your agentic probably, right? I certainly see plenty of it, but yeah, but I mean, the thing is, I think so it's not just that the agents can be used by the threat actors, to find new and novel ways to get in, right? That they've been doing it since long before Mythos existed, frankly, right? I didn't say that before, but that's also true. But there are ways that they can. So it's not just about that particular use. It's about models can be poisoned. Right? I mean, the agents can be manipulated to act in a fashion different than how they were designed, right? I mean, and this is all frontier stuff that, I mean, again, I'm no expert in it, but what's happening, because you just doom scroll on LinkedIn for 10 minutes and you see enough. So it's, I mean, so it really is, but and those ones are tricky. I mean, again, I don't know how a big bank would govern that, I mean, they have to lock it down somehow, or at least try. I mean, I honestly, I'll raise my hand and say, I honestly am not, I don't know how, but I can certainly tell you, though, from the types of threat actors that we track, right, and the types of activities that they engage in. I mean, we're working with a large telco right now in another region of the world where, one of their subsidiaries had the kind of stuff that we've been talking about the past 20 minutes. It actually happened to them, and they, and you got digital forensics teams and incident response teams in there digging around, trying to find, what happened, how did this happen, how did they get their hands on all this data, honestly, these guys, not only are they good at getting it and getting better, but they're also really good at erasing their tracks, because you can go in there and the DFIR teams can, they could be hunting around for months looking for the breadcrumbs and not find anything. That's how stealthy they are. That was a bit of a drift to your question, but
no. But this is one of the reasons why I think this is so important. We've been talking about cybersecurity, at least on this show, for years right now, and I don't think it's getting any easier. And I do think as the technology continues to advance, as compute becomes more powerful, and as throughput becomes, more available. I mean, if you think about NVIDIA's chips, which can get purchased essentially by anybody, I can create a shell company that can buy them. I can then set up a bunch of servers in, let's just say, some small Southeast Asian country, and I can build literally a factory of offensive cyber hackers
Mhm.
that are automated, like you said, that's not just doing one thing, but doing 1,000 things 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Things just keep getting harder and harder. How we haven't really spoken about this at all, but like, how do you do proactive defense? Do you know what I mean? Where like you're blitzing the quarterback as opposed to waiting for the guy to run through the line of scrimmage.
Yeah. No, the way you do it is, look, you have to know where they're coming from, right? You have to see them before they see you, essentially. And it's not easy. Like there aren't a lot of companies out there like us who focus like a laser on the external threat landscape in a very specific fashion. You got a lot of companies out there that do threat intel that can tell you, again, that internet weather of, here's all the bad guys out there doing all this stuff. But how many of them can tell you which one specifically is targeting you specifically? That's a much harder thing to do. But that's what you need to do. You need to have that pre-crime kind of minority report like view of the thing that hasn't happened yet, the precog stuff. And to do that, you have to get very, very deep into the fundamentals, essentially, of the internet. And you have to be able to pick out the communication patterns. You have to be able to sandbox malware really fast, do it at speed, understand what that malicious code is looking to do. And you need to put the pieces of that puzzle together, and you need to keep doing it and doing it and doing it continuously, such that you can, not to repeat myself, but to sever that kill chain, essentially. You want to see them when they are doing their initial reconnaissance, if possible, on you, just probing you, long before they have assembled their weapons, long before they have fired the weapon at you. And of course, everyone's going to have a firewall. Most people will have an EDR or some layer of security that might stop some of that stuff. But because most of it is signature based, right? Hashes, file hashes, malware hashes. And the speed with which these new systems can, you change one character in a file, you add a space or you add a comma or whatever, and make sure the code compiles, it's going to have a completely different hash. So the signature based type detection, it's really effective if you have your finger on the pulse of what it is, but it changes so fast. So that's why when we talk about the proactive nature of what we do, we sometimes like to say it's preemptive, because we really are trying to actually stop it before it happens. But you're trying to get a bead on the adversary while they are still spinning up their infrastructure, before they have got their tooling all figured out, days or weeks before they've even launched their first, lob at you, so to speak. If you can do that, and when I say do that, what I'm talking about is essentially orchestrating a data feed of the very specific indicators of attack and of compromise, right? All of, the C2 servers that they're setting up, the URLs that they've got, kind of set up behind, where they're kind of staging the things. And of course, the malware itself, right? If you have those things and you're sure of it, then you can orchestrate those signals into your firewall or into your EDR, where you can then enforce and block them. If they come at you, they're blocked. And that's the thing, is that, most of the time, the average, and we measure this stuff pretty rigorously. We know what the industry is able to see overall. Like, we know what the big guys can see. And,
Right.
They see stuff, right? They see stuff. They see commodity stuff, right? That they don't see the bleeding edge stuff fast enough, because the bad guys are always a few steps ahead. And with AI, they're getting even further ahead faster. So, you really got to have a beat on where they're coming from in order to be able to stop it before it happens. It's not easy.
Somebody on your team must have read this book from the 1980s called The Cuckoo's Egg.
It doesn't ring a bell to me, but I'm sure my head of research has.
If you ask the head of research, that dude, depending on how old he is has definitely read this. But this was kind of my introduction into sort of cyber hacking. The whole title is The Cuckoo's Egg: Tracking a Spy Through the Maze of Computer Espionage. But one of the things that I learned about this was that, like, these guys move really slowly when they want to.
Yeah.
Right. In other words,
they have all the time in the world.
Because they have all the time in the world, probably because they're very profitable, first of all. But second of all, like, they're waiting for in a way, it's like a very sophisticated game of chess, right? Because they're waiting for you to make a move that's wrong. And once you do, then they're setting up checkmate. But again, checkmate doesn't happen in like 3 moves, not traditionally, right? So chess players can be very patient. Yeah. Right. So how, again, and because they can be as dynamic as they want, they don't have static offenses, they have dynamic offenses that are constantly changing. And I feel like artificial intelligence allows them to iterate in a way that was never possible even just a few years ago.
You
know what I mean? Like, is it just more dangerous today than it's ever been?
Oh, it's totally true. Once somebody is on the inside, right? They again, like what I said before, like they're not gonna. There's no financial incentive for them to lock your systems and drop a ransom on you unless they have something to ransom.
Exactly.
So, that maybe not universally true, but pay the ransom, unlock. I mean, usually it's in their interest to have something of yours that they can use for double extortion. Is another way, maybe a better way to say it.
Sure.
So they will take their time. You're right, they will. And while they're in there, look, there are tools. Not us, because we don't live on the inside of anybody's network. We are actually zero touch by design. So again, we're focusing on the outside looking in. But for companies that do operate on the inside of networks where they have appliances installed, some of them actually are, pretty good at detecting anomalous activity and suspicious kind of behavior. But it's like behavioral based stuff. And I mean, they use AI themselves, right, to figure out what those are. And so sometimes, if you're lucky, if you're using one of those tools and somebody's already on the inside, you don't know it, you might get a signal from one of those things. But it generally isn't, it's never. It's hard to say. It's hard to say if it's going to be deterministic or not, because, like you said, they're very good at covering up their tracks, so to speak, and moving stealthily. Which is why, again, going back to the whole thing, if you want to, really, prevent the attack, or at least neutralize it, if there's already some level of initial access, the only way to do it is to cut the communication path from the outside. And to do that, you got to know where they're coming from. That's,
exactly.
It all comes back to that. Yeah.
Okay, let's leave it there. Damian, I really appreciate you spending so much extra time with us. I'm genuinely interested in the topic, and I feel like I could keep you, but I also feel like you need to get back to work and like start doing this stuff. And I feel bad for keeping you for so much time, but I really appreciate it. Thank you
a
for
very
indulging
fast
me.
30 minutes. It went really quick. I didn't even realize we'd gone over time. But
Not at all.
no,
Thanks,
thank you.
man.
This was a pleasure. I'd be happy to do it again. Yeah, it was really fun. It's
Beautiful.
cool that we have a similar background pre-cyber too. That's nice.
I love it. I think we were both
It's good stuff, man. Yeah, awesome. All right, thanks, Martin. Appreciate it, man. Take care. Cheers. Bye.
Okay. What an amazing show today. That is it for ATP Insights. Thank you to everybody again for joining us. Highly appreciate it. Thank you to the people that are going to watch this after we put it up on YouTube. Give us a thumbs up on the video. It really helps us out. Subscribe to the channel as well. Follow us on all of our socials, on X, on Instagram, and on LinkedIn. Ask us questions. We love getting the questions. Put comments on the videos that we put out as well. As I said, we'd love to answer your questions directly. Thank you again to Martin Runfort, without who this would not be possible. My name is Michael Waitz. Bye for now.